started in many ways in early conversations during Governor Murphy's transition process of how you create jobs in this century. And what's been quite clear is that the innovation economy, that startups are really what drives major economic revitalization and job creation. So what we did at a time where New Jersey was known as the innovation state, going back to Bell Labs and the biotech industry, so much of that work, particularly in the life sciences, had migrated to Cambridge, to New York City, to Philadelphia, and other places. So we went and we visited those places, and visited places like New Labs and City Labs and Pennovation and Research Triangle, and from that came the concept of the New Jersey Innovation Hub. The New Jersey Innovation Hub was a place where startups, academic scientists, excuse me, and students could actually ply their trade to collaborate in creating an ecosystem that will create jobs. Well, one of the things that we have found that is quite clear that where companies start, they expand, they grow, they hire people, they grow the economy within 20 miles of where they start. So this project will not only have a significant impact on New Brunswick, but on the regional economy in the state. We started with creating, and quite honestly, the New Jersey Innovation Hub, which was going to be a place for startups, was going to be laboratory studios, workspaces, co-working spaces, and it evolved in our discussions with Rutgers is that bringing the academic scientists, the public scientists, and the private sector scientists, the startup, the student, into one environment really could bear extraordinary fruit. So what we did is have created a project, which is before you today, that has three significant components to it. It has the Rutgers Translational Research Facility, where we're creating workspaces for 80 new principal investigators. These principal investigators are working at major universities around the world and throughout the country that Rutgers is in the process of recruiting. They come with NIH, FDA, foundation grants. We're also creating a new place, a first-time place to actually bring the Rutgers Robert Wood Johnson Medical School to downtown New Brunswick, a state-of-the-art facility that are going to give first and second-year medical students the opportunity to actually spend time in the hospital just down the street. As medical education has evolved, so much more of simulation and patient exposure has been important. So the building that was built in the 1960s as the original Rutgers Medical School that then became the University of Medicine and Dentistry will be repurposed in Piscataway, and will bring all of those students, professors, and researchers to downtown. And the third component of it actually is the New Jersey Innovation and Technology Hub, which will be a place for startups, for small pharma, to collaborate with academic scientists. We think it's an extraordinary opportunity. I think it's an opportunity for the city to actually become the epicenter in New Jersey. It represents the largest investment in life science and medical education in New Jersey history. And we're just really glad to be before you and to get this thing started and to be in the ground by the end of the year.
Thank you, Chris. If there's no questions for Mr. Palladino, I will move on. Calling Mr. Chris Roach for testimony.
Sure, it's Christian Roach, R-O-C-H-E.
Mr. Roach, you swear or affirm to tell the truth and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Mr. Roach, you are a licensed professional engineer of the state of New Jersey, is that correct?
That is.
And in that capacity, you are familiar with the civil engineering plans and components of the project that's before the board this evening?
I am.
If you could please give the board the benefit of your professional qualifications and experience.
Sure, I have bachelor's degrees in civil engineering and business from Lehigh University, as well as a master's degree in civil engineering from North Carolina State. As Mr. Kelso mentioned, I'm professionally licensed in the state of New Jersey. My license is in good standing. I've been practicing land development engineering now for approximately 16 years. I've been qualified as an expert in front of numerous boards in the state of New Jersey previously. I think I've probably been in front of this board 20 times in the last decade, but not since the pandemic. So if you don't recognize me, it's just the additional gray hair I've got between my children.
I would offer Mr. Roach as a qualified professional to give testimony. If you could, Mr. Roach, I'm going to just indicate to you to please just give an overview of the site, and then I'm going to allow you freely to go through all the components that we typically would do to provide testimony for civil engineering.
Sure, so I'll start by marking the first exhibit. This is Exhibit A1. It's dated July 6th, 2022, and it's a site aerial. also touch upon some of the proposed site features elsewhere on site, included within block 17.01, lot 1.02. And as Mr. Kelso mentioned, the entirety of the site is in the current redevelopment area, and we're not seeking any variances from that redevelopment plan here this evening. So I'll move on to Exhibit A2, and I'll mark this. This is just a site plan rendering or a colored version of the site layout plan, which was submitted as part of our site plan application package. It is dated July 2022. So what the applicant is proposing to construct on the property is a 12-story research and office building. It'll have a total of 560,000 gross square feet of new space with a footprint of around 41,400 square feet. While the building takes up a good portion of the northwestern site area, we are proposing 3 main additional site features to accompany the Phase 1 development. We are proposing a private access drive in the south of the development. This access drive will be 20 feet wide and will be one way from Spring Street to Kirkpatrick Street. To clarify, we're calling it a private access drive. However, this will be open to the public. It's just from an ownership structure. It will be maintained by the applicant and the owner. However, we anticipate that the public can use this specifically for drop-off type operations, Ubers. We anticipate that type of usage. This drive will also serve as an emergency access drive for not only Phase 1, but also additional future phases of the development. We're proposing a new streetscape along French Street, Kirkpatrick Street, and also along that access drive. Specifically, we're proposing 14 new street trees, along with new PSE&G standard LED light fixtures. These light fixtures have been designed to meet all of the required city lighting levels. And then lastly, we are proposing a plaza to the east of the Phase 1 building. There was a question from the planner and the engineer discussing what would happen in the interim scenario if the Phase 1 building were to move ahead and some of the other phases do not move ahead until a distant future. So to answer that question twofold. Number one is that we are committed with the Phase 1 development. It's fully funded to construct a large plaza area to the east of the Phase 1 building. Our plans currently had shown just a 10-foot paver strip as a placeholder. We can commit, talking to the applicant, that this plaza area will be much larger. It'll be approximately 70 to 75 feet off of the Phase 1 building. And it's really meant to provide a dynamic place where pedestrians can access the site from the train station, hang out. There'll be a host of other amenities within this plaza as it's constructed with Phase 1. From an overall site parking perspective, the redevelopment plan requires a total of 336 parking stalls. This is based on a redevelopment plan requirement of 0.6 parking stalls per 1,000 square feet. Doing the math on the 560,000 total square feet is how we got to 336 required parking stalls. Those parking stalls are proposed to be provided within a wellness parking garage, and that will include not only the standard parking stalls, it'll include the ADA parking stalls as well as the electric vehicle charging parking stalls. Trash and loading operations for the proposed Phase 1 building will be handled in the southwest corner. We have a loading dock that is internal to the building. It has the ability to accommodate WD-40 size trucks, which I like to refer to as medium-sized tractor trailers. It's not the large W67s you see on the highway. It's the tractor trailers with the 33-foot trailers. That area has been designed so that those vehicles can safely pull up Kirkpatrick Street and back into the loading area. Also within that internal loading area is where we'll handle all our trash and recycling operations. Bike parking, there's also a requirement within the redevelopment plan to provide 0.1 bike stalls per 1,000 square feet. Doing the math on that, we have to have 56 bike parking stalls, which will be providing internal to the building, as well as having some external bike racks within the proposed plaza area. Moving on to the more fun stuff, utilities and stormwater management. From a utility perspective, we've actually done quite a bit of legwork with the city and the county in order to develop proposed utility routing to provide water and sewer service to the site off of French Street. I say we've done quite a bit of work for 2 reasons. One, a timing constraint. If you've been on site, you realize that the county is doing improvements at the French Street and Easton Avenue intersection. It's our desire to get all of our necessary utility connections out of French Street before they pave that area. No one likes paving something and then seeing a trench in it 2 weeks later if we don't get the utilities in. I'll also note that the second part of the utilities is they've been designed to handle all of the anticipated future phases. So we've upsized our lines, not just to handle the proposed Phase 1 building, but we'll also handle the future development. Stormwater management, we are complying with the state and city stormwater system. We're basing our assumption under the previous developed conditions on site. When the Farron Mall property developed this, it was entirely impervious, and as a result of that, our new development will be reducing impervious coverage and reducing flows. There's state standards that typically allow for a 5-year look back. I have had some conversations with Mr. Burke on this. He would like me to seek some clarification from the state to just confirm that. So what I've done with the revised plans is, one, I will confirm that for the state. If for some reason that didn't work out and we had to provide underground detention, the plans that were submitted as part of the site plan application show where that underground detention should go. So if the state doesn't agree with our interpretation, we'll install an underground detention system on site that's already been designed and reviewed as part of the site plan application process. So there are a few items I just wanted to touch on to try and address some of the comments we got from the planner and engineer. In general, we have no objection to complying with these review letter comments. There was a question about environmental conditions on the site. I'll start by stating that there is no contamination sources on the site. There are 2 off-site sources which contribute to groundwater flows on the site. One is a former heating oil tank from the county adjacent to Patterson Street, and then there's a dry cleaner further west along Patterson Street. Both of those projects are under active remediation at this point. If you've been on site, the county's actually doing remediation activities, doing injections to clean up their portion of the site, and then the dry cleaner is also doing the same thing. Those parties have their own LSRPs, licensed site remediation professionals, to ensure that their environmental conditions are being met. And as a second measure of insurance, the applicant also has their own environmental professional peer reviewing and making sure we're getting the end result that we want from an environmental perspective. There was also some commentary, questions from some of the neighbors relative to the circulation on Spring Street. Although it's not part of our application this evening, the county, as you've seen on site, is undertaking some intersection improvements to provide improved circulation around the site. Specifically, Spring Street and Spring Street connector will be 2-way up to Church Street. The conversation mainly was focused on what will happen south of Church Street. For now, with this application, we're not proposing any changes to the 1-way movement from Church Street to Patterson Street. In the future, as future phases advance, at that point in time, we think we're going to have the ability to widen Spring Street at this location, and that would allow us to provide 2-way traffic while also maintaining the existing parking loading operations in the area. So we feel that's the right time to potentially move forward with those improvements. So Mr. Kelso, I think that's the high-level overview. I'm sure I missed one or two.
Just one question with regard to the access road. I don't know if you made reference to no parking on that road.
I'm sorry, that's correct. There will be no permanent parking on the access road. It will be utilized for drop-off only.
And just for the record, with regard to the reference to the parking in the wellness garage, that capacity has been provided in written form by the parking authority, is that correct?
That is correct. We have a written letter from the parking authority showing the capacity.
I have no further questions for Chris. The board wishes to direct any?
Any questions from board professionals or members? Can I ask, since this is a multi-phase project, what do we have to look forward to in future phases? Is it okay to ask that?
You can ask that. I can't answer it, but I feel like my buddy Mr. Palladino can.
Mr. Chairman, we're optimistic in working with, and we have a meeting tomorrow actually, is that the second phase, which is to the east of the first building, will be an additional office/research facility, most likely with a major pharmaceutical company or a series of pharmaceutical companies, or biotech companies, or manufacturers of medical devices. So that building, there's an agreement that we have as part of the redevelopment process, will be with the parking authorities, a minimum of 300,000 square feet, but it's quite possible that building could be 300,000 or 400,000 or 500,000 square feet. We're also assessing opportunities for additional public spaces in addition to the plaza that we're building, and potentially a housing option that would include market and affordable housing.
Thank you. And also, the concept plan, I remember seeing it had like an open space between these developments, correct? So that there'd be a kind of a pedestrian way that would
will ask our architect, and we have some renderings that show you where that would be, sir.
Thanks, Chris. If there are no further questions at this time, I'll call Mr. John Martin for testimony.
We only brought one pen.
Please state your name, spell your last name for the record.
My name is John Martin, M-A-R-T-I-N.
Mr. Martin, do you swear or affirm to tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Mr. Martin, you are a licensed professional architect of the state of New Jersey, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
In that capacity, you're familiar with the architectural design and the overall concept design of the whole hub project, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
At this time, I would ask you to give the board the benefit of your professional qualifications and experience.
Thank you. Like my predecessor, I have an architecture degree from North Carolina State University and then a graduate degree in architecture from the Harvard Graduate School of Design. I am a principal and partner of Elkisman Frady Architects in Boston, Massachusetts. And our firm has completed 5 buildings in New Brunswick, 4 buildings in New Brunswick. This will be the 5th.
I would offer Mr. Martin as a licensed professional qualified to provide testimony in this application.
Thank you. Your qualifications are accepted.
If I could then, Mr. Martin, again, I'm going to allow you to speak freely with regard to the overall design, the building design, and as Chris has indicated, the plaza concept to the extent that we have it conceptually.
Thank you, Mr. Kelso. I want to start with this aerial rendering of the project. It's not dated. I will date it July 11th, 2022, and label it A3. This is an aerial view of the project from the north. It shows the 560,000 square foot building in the center. It shows the 70-foot wide paseo that connects French Street back to this new service drive. And it shows a very conceptual idea of what that second phase building might be at about 300,000 square feet shown here. As Mr. Palladino has alluded to, that is the minimum, and it could be bigger than that at the end of the day. But this particular building is, as Mr. Palladino has described, somewhat unique in that it does have 3 very vital components of that innovation ecosystem. And what makes it unique is that all 3 of those components are in a single building, stacked one upon top of another. Often in innovation environments, you see all of these components in separate buildings. But in our particular case, we are stacking them all into a single building. It's a unique opportunity, as Mr. Palladino has alluded to. It's an opportunity that came together at just the right time, and we were able to take advantage of it. I did want to point out that it has a 2-story base, and I'll talk about each of these components as I go up. But the base is animated and made vibrant by a lot of very public-facing functions of the building. The entire ground floor, with the exception of the loading dock areas, is pretty much publicly accessible, and it is designed to activate this outdoor space, which again will come before you later. But that outdoor space contains kiosks and amenities, and it will be activated year-round into the evening in warm and cold weather. So the idea is to make this block a destination, given its proximity to the train station, given its proximity to the hospital, to the cultural district, and to the university. If we took a section, a slice through the building, and looked at it north-south, the shared social spaces that I alluded to anchor the ground floor. The floors, 3 floors low, 1 floor high, that are in red, are the translational research component from Rutgers University. I'll talk more about that in a moment. The 4 floors in the middle, shown here in green, are the teaching spaces for the medical education component of the Robert Wood Johnson Medical School. And 3 floors above that are the Innovation and Technology Hub, which Mr. Palladino has alluded to. At the top of the building is a tall double-stacked mechanical penthouse. These labs need a lot of continuous fresh air. To circulate through the building, so the mechanical penthouses at the top tend to be large. Altogether, the building is 241 feet 6 inches from the pavement to the top of the roof strip. This drawing is, I'll date all of these July 11th, 2022. This will be referred to as A4. Drawing I've just labeled A5 is a ground floor plan. The areas you see in yellow are a 10,000 square foot market hall, which will contain a variety of different food options, and will be anchored at the back by a 3,000 square foot sit-down restaurant that opens up onto that public paseo space. The remainder of the market hall consists of the food service opportunities, and at the front, a big gathering space with movable tables and chairs that can be cleared out and joined with the lobby for receptions of up to 400 people that might be hosted here in the building for events that happen in the building. The lobby is off of French Street. It fronts directly onto French Street, can be approached from the paseo or along the sidewalk. When you come in, there will be a reception desk, a secure reception desk, where the populations will be segregated. Any population that is working in the Rutgers components of the building, the translational piece or the medical education piece, will go to one side and enter a secure turnstile and go to a secure bank of elevators. People who are working in the Innovation and Technology Hub will go to a second set of bank of elevators that serve only those floors, again through a secure entry. Everything you see in gray are the loading facilities, which will come off of Kirkpatrick Street, and all of the mechanical service vaults and chemical storage rooms. There is a very ample bike storage facility with an entrance off of that service road, and all of that will be indoors, protected, and covered. Floors 2 through 4 are dedicated to the Rutgers Translational Research Program. The Translational Research Program is primarily wet bench research. There will be 80 principal investigators that Mr. Palladino has already alluded to that are being hired now by the university and will come and occupy space here. 60 of those researchers will be dedicated to wet bench research. 20 of them will be devoted to dry bench or computational research. And each of the 3 floors accommodates both of those types of research. The lightest green, the most vibrant green here are the wet benches themselves. The perimeter are the write-up desks that the bench technicians will use to compile the results of their experiments. The perimeter in the office space are the private investigators' offices, and this yellow space is the communal space on each floor. All 3 floors are connected by a central stair. There are conference rooms that flank that, as well as soft seating spaces. And these light green areas here to the north and there to the west are where the dry bench researchers do their work in proximity with the wet bench researchers. A lot of the new science that is happening involves both dry bench and wet bench research, so that proximity is very important. I will label this A6. going in terms of the students that will be educated here. As Mr. Palladino has already alluded to, this will be the first and second year medical school component of the Robert Wood Johnson Medical School. This is where the students receive their education before and as they go into the hospital to do their clinical time. The floor is organized with the big communal spaces to the north and that big glass window that I showed you looking at the aerial that you can see from the train and from above the campus to the north. When one comes off of the elevator, there's a reception area here shown in yellow where it contains conference rooms and support space for the reception. And then that whole space opens up into this forum. This is the active informal gathering space for the medical education component. It has a stadium stair that animates that front facade and provides access to go to an upper floor. But before we go there, I want to highlight that this is the primary gathering and meeting space for the whole medical school. It contains a single room here in the southeast corner that can accommodate up to 400 people for a guest lecture. It can be broken down by a movable partition in the middle to two 200-person rooms, and it can be laid out in various alternate formats to suit the medical education, as well as public lectures that are sponsored by the translational research component. So this floor is a real mixing bowl. In the southwest corner, there is a dedicated interactive classroom that's a technology-enabled learning environment for those first-year students where they can do all kinds of computer simulations of the various courses that they're learning in their first and second year. These smaller rooms are breakout rooms, small seminar rooms that accommodate 12 to 15 people for group study and group seminar. I will label this A7. As we go up to the 6th floor, we find this open space. That forum is a tall, 30-foot high open space, so it's the real dramatic space that becomes the center and the heart, not only of the medical school, but the entire building. And as we arrive at the top of that stadium stair, we have the student government component and meditation and wellness rooms in this blue area. We have the medical school student affairs and registrar's office in the yellow, and more seminar rooms, breakout rooms in this kind of peach color. All of this, and these, of course, these large 400-person room and the 200-person interactive technology classroom are all double height spaces as well, so they're 30 feet tall as well. This is A8. There's yet another stair at the top of that stadium stair. If you continue up, and in this northwest corner of the building, you come to the library, which is shown in blue. This is where medical school students study individually and together. And then all in gray along here on the west side are the gross anatomy labs where the first and second year students get their first taste of really working on organs and physical parts of the body. In the east side, in the light purple, are the clinical skills simulation labs where medical school students learn to do exams, they learn to do consultation, they learn to do medical techniques on people that are in distress, and so all of those simulation labs are here. And the school envisions doing some pretty exciting things with outreach regarding different parts of the kind of medical technology system that can come here and learn new skills through the simulation lab. This will be a state-of-the-art simulation lab here to the east. This is A9. small study rooms as well as open carrels in the upper level of the library. This level will also include in this white space the Chancellor's Suite, and in this yellow space, the Dean's Suite of administrative office and conference rooms. This will be Exhibit A10. And then the third component of the building, which occupies floors 9 through 11, are 3 floors of the innovation and co-working component of the building. Like below, this green area will offer some wet bench research space, rented out kind of by the bench or by the group of benches, as well as their wet bench support space in the dark green here. In the yellow and these other pastel colors, there are dry bench co-working spaces, which again can be rented by the desk or by the studio. There's a reception area for there. This whole research environment here is for the startup company, the same as the translational research below. And then in these blue colors, one of the most exciting things about this is these startup companies that are literally incubating right out of the translational research will be in direct proximity to our core partners. There are some commercial lease spaces in the building where companies and entities want to be immediately close to this groundbreaking research, and they will be able to rent space in this building as well. And again, that occupies floors 9, 10, and 11. I'll label it Exhibit A11. And then I'll close with a view from the train itself, not so much an aerial view, but a similar view from the north. And now, having taken you all the way up through the building, you can see the active market hall here, the front entry off of French Street, the 3 floors of translational medicine, and then we open up to this big forum that's 2 stories high, and then the library, which is also 2 stories high. Those are demarcated on the building, and then the 3 floors of the co-working space as well. So one can stand here at the corner of the train station, at the corner of Albany and French Street, and look up, and you can see the stadium stair, you can see the library, you can see all of that activity that's happening in that medical education component. Those large classrooms are expressed here on the eastern facade of the building, and then at the top is that last translational research floor and the rather tall penthouse with all that mechanical equipment in it. I will label this A12 and conclude my presentation.
If I might, before the board might have questions for Mr. Martin, I think Mr. Palladino wants to provide just a brief supplement to that testimony.
I just wanted to add a couple of things. The bike storage area will also have locker rooms with showers, so people who are making bicycles to work, it's kind of important to note. Mr. Martin talked about the public spaces in the building, the market hall. I think something that's really important is what we try to do with every project is that this will be a very public space. It'll be open to the public. Not just Rutgers and our core partners being able to use this for events, but other community organizations use this for events. And the public plaza, we really do intend to manage it much like we do the yard at Rutgers, and actually creating events, creating music events, creating exercise events, and really letting it be a place where people can gather in the city, kind of in a safe, exciting place. With respect to the simulation labs, we have talked with Rutgers over a number of years on thinking of a number of practices that not only will these simulation labs be used by Rutgers for the medical students, but for continuing education for the doctors in the hospital system, the entire Robert Johnson Barnabas system, not just UH here in New Brunswick, nurses and other medical services and medical professionals. In addition, for us to be able to bring first responders in, the New Jersey State Police, the Port Authority Police, the New York City Police, the New Brunswick Police, fire departments, to actually get advanced simulation training. Right now, a lot of our first responders have to get that type of disaster training. They actually go to either Atlanta or to Houston, and we'll be able to do that here in New Brunswick. I think that's just a little over. Thanks.
Members of the board, if you wish to direct any questions to
Oh,
Mr.
I know what I was going to say.
I'm sorry.
Excuse me. You know, I think it's important, and I didn't mention it the first time, is that in addition to Robert Wood Johnson Barnabas Health, EDA, Hackensack Meridian, Princeton, we have already attracted the attention and have created 2 memorandums of understanding collaboration with 2 international universities. So the University of Tel Aviv has a partnership with Rutgers, and they're going to be headquartered here doing partnership research with Rutgers that they've already started, a lot of it around COVID. And then the governor and I signed a memorandum of understanding with the Atlantic Technology Institute in Ireland. And when we open, they're going to send us from their incubator program 5 startup companies, all dealing in the medical device area, to actually be some of our first residents. So, and that would become in both Tel Aviv, the University of Tel Aviv, and the Irish University. This is where those companies would set up their U.S. headquarters. And I think this is something that's pretty exciting.
The board wishes to direct any questions to Mr. Martin? Seeing none at this time, thanks. I would call Mr. Dan Desario for testimony.
No, I'm good, thank you.
Please state your name, spell your last name for the record.
Certainly, Dan, last name is Disario, D-I-S-A-R-I-O.
Swear to tell the whole truth, nothing but the truth.
Yes, I do. Thank you.
Mr. Desario, you are a licensed engineer in the state of New Jersey with a discipline in traffic engineering.
Yes,
And in that capacity, you had an opportunity to provide a traffic statement after review of this plan to the planning board, is that correct?
yes.
Could you give the board the benefit of your professional experience and your qualifications?
Certainly. As stated, I'm a licensed professional engineer in the state of New Jersey as well as several other states. I've been accepted as an expert in the field of traffic engineering before hundreds of boards throughout New Jersey, including this one. And I've prepared well over 1,000 traffic studies for almost every conceivable land use.
I would offer. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, Mr. Desario, just as an overview, if you could provide the charge that you were given and the methodology, and then your statement of conclusions with respect to your traffic review?
Certainly, I don't have any pretty pictures like the architect did, but I think a lot of my thunder's already been stolen. As you heard from Mr. Kelso, this project is consistent with the Ferrin Deck redevelopment plan. We're not seeking any relief as it relates to any aspects of this site, including the traffic aspects, specifically with respect to parking. You've heard from the engineer as well as the rest of the team. The parking will be provided by the wellness deck, which is basically across the street from the project site. I think what's important from a pure traffic perspective as well as pedestrian circulation perspective is that a couple things. This project's bringing essentially an extension of Church Street, even though the applicants indicated it's going to be private for purposes of ownership and maintenance. But that's just going to enhance the circulation in this part of the city. It's going to continue that grid network that already exists. I'm sure most, if not everyone in this room, remembers when this was Ferrin Deck. It's kind of like driving through a tunnel. And sometimes, if you were new to the city, it was pretty intimidating, this section of the city. Deck is down. We've been looking at a construction site for quite a long time. It's been a little difficult to walk around the site, quite frankly. But with this project, you've heard with the plaza that's going to be created, what wasn't specifically stated but is part of the plan, the sidewalks around this first phase are all going to be upgraded to current standards with proper handicap ramps. Everyone's aware that the county project is under construction right now. That's going to essentially extend Spring Street, so there will be a 4-way intersection with the traffic signal, which is going to enhance circulation in this part of the city. I think when you look at it in total, this project's going to continue to provide an enhancement in terms of pedestrian circulation in this part of the city. You've heard we don't have any driveways other than the one that's proposed for the service portion of the building to the southwest corner of the site. So we are not introducing any new curb cuts other than the one for loading, which I also think is a positive. In conclusion, you've heard from the witnesses before me, but if I were to ask you, we want to do a building in the city that's going to basically have synergies with the hospital and the university. Where would you want to put it? When I look at it from a pure circulation perspective, I think this is an ideal location. It's across the street from the train station. So people coming to this building, a lot of them are going to be affiliated with the university. A lot of them are going to be affiliated with the hospital. A lot of them are going to live in the city and are going to be able to walk to this site. A lot of them are going to be students, as you've heard. A lot of the students at the university live in the city and they walk to the university. I think this is an ideal location for this type of facility. And being across from the train station, it's going to allow people that work in this location to not only live in the city, but they could live elsewhere too and take the train into the city and then quite easily walk across the street. I think this is an ideal location from a pure traffic and pedestrian circulation perspective, in particular because it is across from the train station and it's close to the hospital and the university. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that anyone may have.
Thank you.
That four-way intersection that you mentioned on Spring Street, that's the corner of Spring and Patterson?
And French Street.
That's
So
right.
it's Easton,
Okay.
French, and then Spring Street's going to be extended.
The four-way intersection is actually Spring Street and Route 27.
Okay.
And so at that point, you will be able to come out of Church Street or the Church Street decks, make a right-hand turn and decide to go straight up Easton Avenue, go left to go south on Route 27, or go right on north. And coming in, you can come in and from Easton Avenue, come all the way across, go up Spring Street, and go to Patterson or Bayard.
So like right now, and I think it's a great idea, George Street is closed, right? You have the outdoor dining, it's pretty cool. In the future, somebody, if the city elects to keep that going, which I hopefully you do for selfish reasons, I like to dine in the city, but you could come up Church Street and then you'll be able to get to the connector and access French Street and Easton Avenue at the existing traffic signal. So this is the county project. They're creating that fourth leg, the existing three-leg intersection. Really a great thing for this part of the city to see happen.
And even though there's no parking associated with this, there's an agreement that parking will be provided at existing decks. But your conclusion is that no significant impact on traffic in the central portion of the city or elsewhere.
Correct. And if you look at it historically, this site was a fair and deck. It had retail on the ground floor. I remember Marita's Cantina. There was a Mongolian barbecue place. So when you look at it historically, we're not really changing what historically the city experienced in terms of traffic. And if anything, it's going to be an improvement because of the extension of Church Street and then the introduction of that fourth leg that the county's doing at that existing signal.
If there are no further questions, members of the board, that completes our presentation.
Public input? Anyone proceed with that then?
All right, so, I guess you would have to begin that, and then I would do the getting the public together.
Okay, at this point, I think we're going to open this up for public input. Those of you who want to present, please indicate. And are we sticking with our 5-minute rule
Correct,
here?
I'll keep track. So if anyone who is interested in addressing the board on this, and asking questions on this application, please announce yourself, we'll put you on the list, and you can come up and have 5 minutes to speak and ask your questions.
Maybe,
addressing the board.
maybe raise your hand if you intend to do so.
Yes, and I'll add you to the list.
Mr. Cradible?
like, could you please state your name, spell your last name for the record?
Charlie Cradaville, Kritovil.
You swear affirm to tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
I do.
The floor is yours, you have 5 minutes.
Before you start the clock, I wanted to ask if the board received my letter sent earlier today.
I haven't seen your letter.
Okay, I sent it to the secretary. May I approach and give you a
Sure.
copy? I did have some communication with your secretary over the weekend, and be so kind as to take one and pass it down. Under your rules, specifically order of presentation, Rule 2:2-3, it sets forth that upon conclusion of the presentation of the application, any objectors wishing to present a case in objection to the relief sought may do so in such order as may be recognized by the chair. The next section, there is no section E, but the next section is F, and that talks about public commentary by interested parties, and it says that each such interested party shall be subject to a reasonable time. I've made clear in writing to the board that I'd like to be an objector for both applications tonight, and the part about objectors doesn't have a time limit. I don't want to prolong the meeting, but I did want to be able to, introduce evidence and ask questions of the witnesses without having to do it all in 5 minutes. I think it's unreasonable to require an objector to make their entire case in 5 minutes. So I would ask that I be able to make that objection
You're
under...
requesting relief from our 5-minute limitation on the basis of your being an objector. And will you specifically limit your questions and comments to the application at hand?
Yes, but first I did have some procedural issues just to raise.
Okay, I have a feeling Mr. Kelso has issues.
Yeah, I'd like to respond to this. I learned of Mr. Cradaville's request maybe an hour before this meeting. But the fact of the matter is, the intent for interested parties is a 5-minute limitation, and that is exactly what's in the zoning ordinance. The problem is, Mr. Cradaville is trying to utilize the technicality of being classified as an objector in order to gain more time for him to make comment that may or may not be germane to this application. This is a redevelopment application with a redeveloper in accordance with a plan that's fully compliant. So in order for me to have the ability to respond to what he's attempting to do, I'd like him to tell us what his objections are. Otherwise, I think the board has to see him as nothing more than an interested party. He doesn't live within 200 feet. I don't believe he owns property in New Brunswick. He's a candidate for public office. He has other reasons to attempt to use this forum as a place to be able to make a speech. If he has legitimate objections that go to the heart of this plan, in a plan that is fully compliant with the redevelopment plan, then I think he should tell us what they are. Because otherwise, he may be raising issues that aren't properly before the planning board. Planning board has jurisdiction over certain things, but it doesn't have jurisdiction over everything. So I object that Mr. Cradaville wants to use the benefit of my client's conforming application to do statements, make statements, do things that don't really relate to this application. So let him state what his objections are, and if he has a legitimate objection that runs to the applications itself, then he can state us what his objections are. Otherwise, he should be limited to the 5 minutes like everybody else is.
And your response to that, Charlie?
I'd be happy to explain a little bit, and
Here's the thing,
yeah.
it has been made clear that this is really in complete compliance with what the board has previously approved as a redevelopment plan back in January? No, wait a minute, I'm mixing that up with this year's meeting.
No, I think that there was an amendment earlier this year to this plan, but I don't remember offhand exactly when.
Yeah, so, again, we've limited in what we can do as a result of that. If you have substantive recommendations as to, ways that this could improve the product, that sort of thing, that maybe board members will want to hear, that sort of thing. But really isn't a good time to just bring in extraneous things which are not relevant to this.
Sure.
Is that acceptable, Steve?
Yeah, I think he should tell us what his objections are.
Okay.
Yeah, so the first objection is the way the board is constituted, and I can explain further. And then the second issue is regarding the contamination. I'm concerned about the contamination. I appreciate the applicant's presentation, and they did acknowledge the off-site contamination. I had some questions about it, some evidence I wanted to
And he's
introduce
got
about
5
it.
minutes to do that.
And,
It's a legitimate question to ask, but it's not an objection.
well, they were not limited to 5 minutes.
You
The
know-
rules make it clear objectors, should be able to have the time to introduce evidence, and I don't have a ton of it. I won't be long-winded.
He's
Like-
stating that he wants to object, but now what he's stating is he's interested in the information. Let him ask the question. He's got 5 minutes to ask it, we'll answer.
Let's start with the 5 minutes and see how it goes, Charlie. How about
Okay.
that?
Well, how about before that, can I raise
Because
the...
again, the two things that you mentioned, I don't know if I see that as particularly relevant to the board's deliberations tonight. That's just from what I heard so far.
Fair enough. I will just briefly state my concern about the membership of the board. So,
I object to that. What does that have to do with the applicant's application before the board? It's extraneous. It has
I'm not sure I
nothing to
do, but either. However, we are giving Charlie 5 minutes here to speak his piece.
Okay.
He's using it up, go ahead.
and, well, and may I call a witness? Sure.
If he's an interested party, he has 5 minutes to speak. If he's going to call a witness, the witness is part of his 5 minutes.
That's not what I was told by board counsel. I was told that any witness would get 5 minutes as well. Nevertheless, that's not what the rules say.
On their own. If they come and they want to express comment on the application, they get their 5 minutes.
How about that, Charlie? You give your 5-minute presentation, and then this other person can have 5 minutes to present their case also as.
I don't want to seem obstructive, I'm just saying, any interested party has a right to speak for 5 minutes. But
But I-
it's not orchestrating it as a result of him being an objector and being able to bring people and ask them questions.
I have a statutory right to cross-examine the witnesses, and I have a right to be an objector. You don't need to have a lawyer to be an objector. So under your rules, I should be allowed to be an objector, and I should be allowed to call a witness, and I'll reveal the only witness I would like to call would be Dan Dominguez to speak to him about the issue with the board members. So,
Well, just if I could, Mr. Chairman,
Yeah.
rather than dancing around it, what exactly is your objection to the constitution of the board? Why don't we start with that?
thank you for allowing me
Just say it.
to
You're
say
not
it.
a witness, just say what it is.
Yeah, so I have the planning board website here. States class 4, 6 other citizens of the city to be appointed by the mayor. Quote, "The members of class 4 hold no other municipal office. Among the class 4 members are Zachary Wright and Matthew Ferguson, my 2 favorite board members, but they do hold other municipal office, is my understanding. So I'm trying to square that with what's on the city website and the way the board is constituted.
I'll look to you, Mr. Counselor. I don't know what office they hold, and if in fact it is a city office by definition.
Again, I don't know what this has to do with the
I have
application
that-
I
I have
just put
that.
before you.
Zoning board and housing authority.
I understand him to be suggesting that they're not eligible to vote. Is that accurate?
I'm suggesting, according to the city website, that they should not be class 4 members of the planning board.
And therefore you're
If that's true,
suggesting-
which is why I wanted to ask Mr. Dominguez.
And you are therefore suggesting they aren't eligible to vote? Is that the consequence of your argument?
If this is true, what's on the city website, then yeah, they should not be class 4 members of the planning board.
Look, I would only say, what's on the website isn't the statute. It's not anything from my view that's citing what the law is. And it
more
may be
importantly,
wrong.
That's a question for the chair to determine, and if the chair determines that they're eligible to vote, then they're eligible to vote.
These members have served well for some time now. I don't see any reason why they couldn't continue to serve as board members and vote on this particular application. So I can't accept that, Charlie.
Okay. I would raise one other issue about the constitution of the board that Ms. Sikora Ludwig has come out in support of this project and been loud and proud about it, and that in light of that, she should recuse herself from tonight's vote.
I can't agree with that either, Charlie. You know, Ms. Ludwig has served on this board for, well, long before I came along. You know, and I don't know if we can control what people say about projects. I don't know if I agree with that. I appreciate your raising these concerns and objections for us to consider, but I can't accept that tonight.
All right, I appreciate you giving me the chance to explain those, and, for the record, I do object to a time limitation if you are going to put one on my remaining remarks.
I think we are.
Duly noted. May I cross-examine the witnesses? Like Mr. Roche and Mr. Palladino?
I just object to the characterization of cross-examine. He can ask them questions.
It's a
The public has
statutory right.
I'm saying the same thing, Charlie, just calm down. He has a right to ask questions of the witnesses. He's got 5 minutes to do it.
You're within your 5 minutes.
I'm sorry?
I said you're still within your, correct?
Yes.
Ask your questions.
Okay. So, for Mr. Roche, you mentioned the 2 off-site sources of contamination. Isn't it true that one of them is no longer a dry cleaners, it's a restaurant, and Robert Wood Johnson is in charge of the cleanup?
It is.
Okay. May I introduce evidence, or am I not an objector?
You're within your 5 minutes, go ahead.
Okay, so I'd like to introduce this into evidence. For you.
Can you tell the board what that is?
Yes, so this is a letter to the county engineer, July 21, 2017, from CME Associates regarding the contamination at the site. I'd like to ask Mr. Palladino about this situation here. The letter concludes by stating, it's my professional opinion as the LSRP of record that the existing site conditions warrant the declaration of an emergency conditions and completion of expedited removal actions in order to mitigate the current hazards. And earlier in the letter, it cites Devco's contractor as excavating approximately 50 cubic yards of contaminated soil and stockpiled the material directly on the adjacent ground. It says excavated soils were not placed atop plastic sheeting, nor has the soil stockpile been covered with plastic sheeting. I want to understand if Mr. Palladino can tell us about this emergency situation, what led to it, and what assurances we have that the contamination has not spread to this site where the development's proposed.
Mr. Chairman, I've never seen this site.
I don't think any of us.
I will note copied on the letter is Thomas F. Kelso in his capacity as Middlesex County Counsel. And that the county did lead the cleanup, and that they did hire a contractor to do this emergency cleanup. But I don't know, what came of it. And maybe Mr. Roach knows more.
Well, let me give you my response to that. The overall site had contamination, still has contamination. The analysis that the LSRP did for Devco and the LSRP for the County of Middlesex had to do a long-term analysis of where the plume of the spill was that came from the county administration building, and had to isolate where it was, and then to identify what type of remediation or mitigation would take place. That letter's 2017, it's now 2022. The county, this particular location where this building is being done has been remediated to the extent that all contaminated soil has been removed, as well as all the contaminated soil on the balance of the site, which you see as phase 2, which is where the primary plume was. The only thing left, as far as the county's LSRP is aware, is there needs to be 4 wells where there's going to be injections of chemicals to mitigate groundwater contamination. There's a total of 4 of those that are scheduled 4 months apart, and from what I'm understanding, that there may not even be a need for 4. So that all of that county contamination has been contained. All the soil has been removed over a period of years from an independent contractor. And what's left here is what was testified to by Chris Roach, which is a remediation of where the, I think it's where the dry cleaner was.
I'm no expert in this stuff, but my understanding, you know, having off-site plumes that migrate into a project, there's nothing all that unusual about that. And these are just, you know, part of the whole remediation process that has to occur prior to construction. I think that's being addressed at this time.
It's largely been addressed.
One other.
1 minute.
Thank you. So these are three figures. Louis Berger is the contractor that produced them, apparently for Devco. And do want to just draw attention to the plume. And I'll note that the plume lines up with the area that's not being developed at this time and appears to spare the area for development. And I just wanted to ask if, Mr. Palladino, if it's fair to say that the main reason we're here tonight on only part of this site is the residual contamination from the...
I'm going to answer that's not accurate. I already explained that the remediation of that plume, that the soil has been removed and there's only the injection wells left.
Yeah, I have to agree,
Mr.
Chair, I
Chair.
think it's been addressed.
If we were prepared to move forward with the second phase at the moment, we would have been here with an application.
Okay.
So there's an ongoing process that's being marshaled by the county. We're confident. We have our own LSRP who's giving us advice, making sure everything is being done appropriately. And we've had this very good partnership with the county and the city to make sure that the site's been cleaned up.
Thank you. If I may just ask, finally, I did not see a bus shelter on the plans, and I would respectfully request that the board make it a condition of approval for there to be some shelter for people to catch the bus. This is a very popular stop for people catching intercity buses as well as Coach USA buses, and just respectfully would ask them to include that in the proposal.
Chairman, there is no place on our site to put a bus stop, but as part of this reconfiguration, where there is this island, I believe that it's the intention of that to become a bus stop because there is the carve-out. That also gets the buses kind of away from the site just a bit. And I'm not aware, although I will follow up, as if the county actually intended to build a bus stop, a shelter.
Okay. Hope to see that. Thank you.
Thank you, Charlie. Who's next?
Hi, yes, Danielle Moore.
Can you spell your last name for the record?
M-O-O-R-E.
Can you start and tell what you're talking about the truth?
Yes, I do. Well, first, I would just like to start off with, wow, seeing a lot of high-rise buildings due to where I'm a resident, been here 45 years all my life, due to where, wow, I know almost 20 years ago, Mayor Cahill said, wow, the reason for knocking down Memorial Parkway was because he didn't want any high-rise buildings in New Brunswick because it's a fire hazard. Not saying that I don't enjoy seeing the upgrade, but being lied to, the public where it went to the newspaper and all, instead of saying, wow, I think it's time for New Brunswick to do an upgrade, instead of him lying, saying we don't want any high-rise buildings in New Brunswick because it's a fire hazard. And like I said, very sad that we have a mayor that lies so much. Next thing I will say, sad to say, it seems like, wow, French Street, Somerset Street, wow, pretty soon we'll be going all to what, Rutgers University, Robert Wood Johnson, wow, because all of you want money in your pockets where you don't care about the residents who are living here, where, wow, I will say with all this construction work due to where I'm on Somerset Street, wow, what are we going through in the area? Wow, with rats, with all this digging going on, with all this construction, rats as big as the size of my foot running up and down the road in broad daylight. Please, do you really think about the residents, or this is about money in your pockets? Not saying whether this will be a good idea, but wow, how many construction sites do you have going on in regards to Rutgers and Robert Wood Johnson at one time? please, like I said, wow, this is, I know it used to be called sort of a city of New Brunswick, but I guess you can call this the city of, Robert Wood Johnson and Rutgers University due to where what? You're taking everything. For this project to be done, if this was the case for you to change your mind of what was the first plan on this, why didn't you put the cancer center here instead of tearing down a school, a very good school, putting kids in danger at 50 Jersey Avenue where what? How much crime you have, how many people you have killed over there in the past month? How much crime is over there? You could have put the cancer center there instead of putting those kids over there, 50 Jersey Avenue by railroad tracks. Please, money's not going to be there to save you in every way. You guys better think about doing the right thing because the Lord is really watching you. Everything's about money to you guys. Instead of doing the right thing for the residents in New Brunswick and stop thinking about what Rutgers and Robert Wood Johnson. Then my safety question, due to where I'm a person where I follow up with safety, please, with French Street, I know it's a situation now, but please tell me when you get your project started, is that side of French Street going to be closed? May I get an answer? It's sort of the same thing on Somerset Street with Plum Street due to where you cannot walk on that side.
During construction.
You mean temporarily closed?
Yes, with the construction going on.
We have not submitted our construction logistics plan yet to the city, and we'll review that with them, and if possible, keep it open.
Well, please do, because one reason why I say, and I pointed out before, even with the county, when they were fixing the sidewalks, if you do plan on closing the road, the sidewalk off there, please put your sign up towards Joyce Comer Avenue and French Street and say the sidewalk is closed, where the pedestrians can walk with the walkway and the light instead of walking down to French and Kirkpatrick Street. Due to where you have to cross under the railroad tracks. No one's there to guide the pedestrians to have to cross the street there. So for safety, please, like I said, as a person due to where I'm concerned, I hope you do look into that. Please, thank you.
Thanks for your advice. Is there anyone else asking questions or providing any statements? Hearing none? Can I just ask a question? Sure. Were there any recommendations or requirements that the planning board had previously specified for this, and were those considered? Sorry, I didn't prepare you for this.
Anything that the board had brought up that would have been factored into the plan as part of the amendment when it was, or the approval when it was initially done. Off the top of my head, I can't think of any specific one for this project.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions from board members or board professionals? Entertain a motion.
Are there conditions? Excuse me. Are there conditions then? That was me. Are there any conditions prior to a vote?
Yes. Should the board act favorably on this application, we recommend the following conditions. Compliance with the terms of the city engineering report dated July 1st, 2022. Payment of a site performance bond in an amount reviewed and approved by the city engineer. Submission of a site inspection escrow deposit for engineering inspection fees in an amount calculated pursuant to Title 16/21/160. Payment of all water and sewer connection fees. Issuance of a road opening permit from the city engineer if required. The applicant shall schedule a pre-construction meeting with the city engineering department in compliance with the terms of the Vignell Consulting Group report dated July 8th, 2022. Payment of any redeveloper fee if applicable to the city of New Brunswick. Planning review escrow funded for all anticipated post-approval reviews. Payment of any other fees due to the city of New Brunswick related to the development or use of the project. Payment of all outstanding taxes and water sewer fees. Middlesex County Planning Board approval or waiver. Freehold Soil Conservation District approval or waiver. Any other outside approval or waiver as required. Submission of engineering and or architectural plans to comply with any changes required by the planning or engineering memos or plan amendments offered and hearing if any. Execution of a Title 39 parking enforcement agreement. Compliance with the city's water service system ordinance, trash and recycling pickup to be done on site unless an encroachment allowing into the public right-of-way is approved by city council. Streets shall be kept clean of sediment and debris. The applicant shall cause the streets to be cleaned or directed to do so by the Director of Public Works. Replacement of damaged streets, curbs, and sidewalks per the direction of the city engineer, and the applicant is seeking a preliminary and final site plan.
Motion to approve with the aforementioned conditions.
Second.
Who seconded?
Anthony, Kevin, you want?
Yulita Checo?
Yes.
Matt Ferguson?
Yes.
Suzanne Spore Ludwig?
Yes.
Ivan Adorno?
Yes.
Zach Wright?
Yes.
Steve Camioni?
Yes.
Evan Hoagland?
Yes.
Bob Carlton.
Yes.
Thank you very much, members of the board, appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Yes, maybe we can take 5 minutes for a rest stop.
Should I stay for this?
Okay, we have one additional project among the public hearings for today. This is RTF and B Urban Renewal LLC.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman.
Yes,
I am the court reporter, and I'm interrupting you because apparently my machine's not working right now.
okay.
Just
I thought
1
we
second,
were not
please.
in session or something.
This is not,
All right, let's give you a minute. Take your time.
thank you.
You good?
I'm good.
Great. Okay. So the second application we have under our public hearings today is RTFNB Urban Renewal LLC. Address 4555 US Highway number 1 at 35 Labor Center Way. Block 7.710, lot 7.02, 7.03, 7.04, and block 707.01, lot 35.13. This is planning board number 2002-03. We're here to consider preliminary and final site plan and a major subdivision application to subdivide this 4-lot property into 8 new lots, as well as demolish the existing improvements on the property and construct 2 mixed-use buildings consisting of rental apartments with ground floor retail space and restaurants, townhomes, and a retail and restaurant pad, along with associated parking, lighting, landscaping, signage, and other improvements on the property. And this will proceed in 3 phases. This is the Sears redevelopment plan, medium intensity and light intensity, and this will be presented by Catherine A. Coffey, if I pronounce that correctly.
You got it right, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
All right, great. My husband says he can hear me from down the street, so not a compliment. All right, so good evening, everybody. I am Kate Coffey from Dave Pitney. I'm here tonight on behalf of the applicant, RTF NB Urban Renewal LLC, which is the designated redeveloper of the property that the chairman described, located at 45 through 55 US Highway 1 and 35 Labor Center Way. The properties are Block 710, lots 7.02, 7.03, and 7.04, and Block 707.01, lot 35.13. We are located in the Sears redevelopment plan area. As the chairman indicated, we are seeking preliminary and final major subdivision approval. We are taking the 4-lot property and dividing it into 8 lots. Those lots consist of an approximately 7.88 acre lot, which is shown on our plans as lot 7.041, approximately 9.07 acre lot, which is shown as lot 7.042, an approximately 5.05 acre lot, which is shown as lot 35.131, an approximately 6.61 acre lot, which is shown as lot 35.132, an approximately 3.5 acre lot, which is shown as lot 7.043, an approximately 1.01 acre lot, which is shown as lot 7.031, and an approximately 1.55 acre lot, which is shown as lot .7032. There are no changes proposed to the configuration of existing lot 7.02, which is approximately 1.87 acres. In connection with the subdivision, the applicant is seeking relief from sections 35 and 36 of the municipal land use law, which requires that each lot abut a previously approved street or public road. We have lots that do not abut a public road, but will have access to the public road via the private roads within the proposed development and pursuant to a common resources easement agreement. As the chairman also indicated, we are seeking preliminary and final site plan approval. What's being proposed is we'll be demolishing the existing improvements on the property, which you probably all know is currently a vacant Sears. But we are retaining 2 restaurant pads that exist on the property today. It's an On the Border and a Houlihan's, so it's anyone's favorites, they'll still be there. In addition to that, we're constructing 2 mixed-use buildings, which include rental apartments with ground floor retail space and restaurants, stacked townhomes, a retail pad, and a restaurant pad, along with associated parking, lighting, landscaping, signage, and other associated improvements. So specific to the lots that we propose to be subdivided, on lot 7.041, the applicant is proposing to construct the first of the 2 5-story mixed-use buildings. It will include approximately 268 residential rental units, 9,186 square feet of retail space. There'll be 353 parking spaces, which include ground and basement level parking that are dedicated to the residential users, 14 spaces that are dedicated to the retail, and 129 shared parking spaces. On 7042, it's the second of the mixed-use buildings, also 5 stories, approximately 262 residential rental units, 11,133 square feet of retail space, and 297 parking spaces, which again include, 297 parking spaces that are dedicated to the residential uses, including ground and basement level parking, 16 spaces dedicated to the retail use, and 70 shared parking spaces. On proposed lots 35.131 and 132, lot 35.132 that is, the applicant's proposing to construct 190 for-sale stacked townhomes that will be in a total of 16 buildings. Each of the townhome units has a driveway parking space as well as a garage parking space. And in addition to those parking spaces, there are 112 shared on-street parking spaces. On lot 7031, the applicant's proposing an approximately 3,556 square foot retail or restaurant use with a drive-through and 28 parking spaces. And finally, on lot 7043, the applicant's proposing to construct 1 single-story retail building with approximately 23,256 square feet and 180 dedicated surface parking spaces, along with landscaping and signage that would be suitable to a grocer. We need no variance relief from the redevelopment plan. We do, however, require design waiver relief from the redevelopment plan. This relief includes a waiver from ordinance section 17.07040, subsection A, 4BI, which requires street trees on all frontages to be spread out an average of 50 feet with a maximum spacing of 70 feet between trees. So we have a comprehensive landscaping plan with really robust planting, which includes over 344 shade trees, 300 of which are street trees. However, we do not provide street trees between the townhouse driveways because it gets to be a maintenance dispute between neighbors, whose tree is it to trim and water, etc. And shade trees are not provided between the retaining wall and the roadway along the eastern property line. And also the northern roadway of the multifamily buildings, there are some areas where the spacing between the trees exceeds 70 feet, but we are happy to coordinate with municipal professionals on spacing. We We also require a waiver from ordinance section 1707-070 C1D, which requires that the periphery of all buildings be landscaped with shrubs and trees. All of the proposed buildings are landscaped per the ordinance, except for areas that have decorative pavement or building along the building facade, and those include Building G and portions of Building C. We need a waiver from ordinance section 1707-070 C2K, which requires at least 10% of the gross parking area of any parking lot to be landscaped. The majority of our parking lots meet that standard. However, we need relief for Building C and Building A, which are slightly lower than 10%. We need a waiver from ordinance section 1707-070 C2H, which requires a 5-foot landscape buffer between parking areas and property lines. We have an existing nonconformity on the site that's there today on the western portion of the property, where there is a curb line that's 1 foot and 6 inches from there, so we can't maintain the buffer, the 5-foot buffer in that location. And lastly, we need a waiver from ordinance section 1707-070 C2H, which requires a 10-foot landscape buffer between parking lots and public right-of-ways. We are providing the 10-foot buffer. However, there's a prescribed mix of planting, which we deviate from with regard to shrubs that are being proposed. The redevelopment plan does require a 100-foot buffer between the proposed development and the Cotter Drive Dewey Heights neighborhood, which the applicant is observing. And we are in the process of identifying dead and diseased trees within that buffer to be removed and replaced with hardier plants that are more likely to thrive and fill out that buffer area. We've had several meetings with the neighbors in that community, and as part of those meetings, the applicant would agree to a condition, if it were to be approved, requiring the applicant to enter into a buffer maintenance agreement with the city for the maintenance of the 100-foot buffer between the development and that Cotter Drive Dewey Heights neighborhood. With us this evening, we have Sean Savage of Matrix New World Engineering. He's the project engineer. David Minnow of Minnow Wasco, who is the project architect. And Matthew Seckler from Stonefield Engineering, who is the project traffic engineer. We also have Jason Tronco of Melillo & Bauer, who's the landscape architect, who's available to answer questions should the board have any with respect to the proposed landscaping. If it's acceptable, Mr. Chairman, I'd ask that Mr. Savage join us and introduce himself and be sworn in.
Please proceed.
Thank you.
Savage, can you please state your name, spell your last name for the record?
Sean Savage, S-A-V-A-G-E.
Do you swear affirm to tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
I do.
All right, Mr. Savage, can you please introduce yourself to the board and the public and tell them about your experience and credentials?
I'm a licensed civil engineer in the state of New Jersey, been practicing for around 25 years. Haven't testified here before, but have testified in numerous towns and cities throughout New Jersey.
We'd ask that Mr. Savage be accepted as a professional engineer and be qualified to provide expert testimony.
So accepted.
Thank you. All right, Mr. Savage, can you please walk us through the location of the property and
Can I
describe?
come up here?
I think so.
Can everybody see that? Maybe you could turn that so that, yeah, that's there, thank you.
Tell me the date on those plans?
The date of this is a plan, it's a colored rendering entitled Conceptual Site Plan A1.1. It's dated 7/11/22.
And we'll mark that as Exhibit A1, correct?
Okay, so you got a good background of all the lots and existing proposed lots, just to kind of orient to the property. The property here is located, has frontage on Route 1 and Phelps Avenue. Route 1's to the south, Phelps Avenue and Labor Center Way are to the north. The site has the Rutgers Administrative Building located to the west. It has some residential apartments to the north, west, and then some residential single-family to the north and east. The entrance entrances of the site, we're going to be maintaining the existing entrances. There's two right in, right out only on Route 1, and there's a full access entrance drive at Phelps Avenue and Labor Center Way. Those are all to remain. Previously mentioned, we're going to be proposing 198 stacked townhome units. They'll be located up here in the north section of the site, located within 16 buildings. Each of these units will have a garage and driveway combination for parking, and trash and collection, things like that will be dealt with on a per unit basis. Will be kept in the garage and then rolled out for collection. The next portion of the building, up here near Phelps, we're going to have a dog run located just to the south side of the entrance drive off of Phelps. There's going to be, and I'll get into stormwater in a little bit, but there's a stormwater management basin located up along Phelps Avenue as well. The next part, the center portion of the property, is going to be where the mixed-use building is located. This is what's referred to as buildings A and B. Building A is going to have 268 residential units within it, and then also with the garage parking beneath that. That garage parking, the entrance for building A is located up here along the access aisle on the, sort of on the western side of the site. You'll enter from there, you'll enter into the one level of the parking. There'll be an internal ramping to get to the second level of the garage parking. In the middle between the two A and B buildings, there's going to be amenity space here. I believe the architect recovered, but it's about, I think it's about 16,000 square feet, I think it was. And then there's some outdoor facilities, some shade shelters, a pool, and some more shade shelters up there. On the building B, we have two entrances to the parking garage. The one up here on the northwest side enters to the upper parking level, and the entrance down here on the more on the east side enters at the lower level. Around the mixed-use building, there's a number of loading spaces that you can see here hatched. There's some over here on the southwest side, and there's some up here along the northern side of the buildings. Those will be utilized for people moving in and out of the buildings, things such as that. So those will be restricted for that kind of parking. In addition to the internal parking, we're also proposing, as part of buildings A and B, there's also a retail component that's going to be located here on the Route 1 frontage of each building. These, as previously mentioned, in building A, there's approximately 9,200 square foot of retail restaurant space. On building B, there's approximately, I think it's like about 11,200 square feet of retail and restaurant space. And then the parking that's going to be associated with those retail uses that was mentioned previously is located right here along the frontage of these of the buildings. As previously mentioned, there's 14 for the one building and 16 for the other one. There's also shared parking associated with these two buildings, which would be located down here in between buildings A and F, and some additional shared parking up here located to the east of buildings B, in between buildings B and C. As you can see, and again, the architect will get into it, but there's also more amenity space, outdoor space located, within the buildings, it's called, but obviously on top of the parking areas. Next, I'll move over to building C, which is the approximately 22,300 square foot building that's sort of planned to be for a grocery food type store. And that has 187 parking stalls associated with it. It's over here. This also has a loading area for the building, located up here on the northeast side, as well as some additional trash collection over here on the northwestern side of the site. Forgot to mention, but for the mixed-use buildings, trash will be, collected internally and will be brought out from the building to a location along the eastern side of the building, which will then be collected. So the trash would be dumpsters, et cetera, will be brought out to be collected. Think back to Building C, I think pretty much covered that, the parking associated with that. The next proposed building would be what we're referring to Building G down here, which is the 3,500 square foot drive-through restaurant or retail use. And that one has also has its own parking associated with it. I think we're providing 70, I think, for that, and it needed 28. And then there's the two existing buildings, the F and H, which are to remain as they currently are. Lastly, there's another stormwater basin that's located over here in the far eastern portion of the site. And that kind of covers the initial part of the site. As mentioned, in terms of subdivision, get used to that, the lots up here for the townhomes, those are going to be get those lots again. 35, 131, 35, 132, and then there's going to be the 7.041, 7.042, 7.043, and then there's 7.02, which is remaining as is, 7.031 to the new drive-through, and 7.03 2 for the final build. Lastly, just kind of, or not lastly, but get into stormwater, as previously mentioned, that the on-site currently existing conditions obviously fully developed. We're actually reducing the impervious coverage somewhat from that existing condition, and therefore certain aspects of the stormwater management regulations would not be applicable, such as water quality, recharge requirements, because by reducing the impervious coverage, we're meeting those requirements. However, because of the existing conditions, the drainage has a break, sort of in the middle of the site. But once you remove the existing buildings and construct the new buildings, you kind of change a little bit of the direction and the break of where the water would go. So we have provided two stormwater management basins to just sort of attenuate those flows, and we have a number of drainage areas which flow generally towards Route 1, towards Phelps, none of which, all those are being reduced according to the stormwater management regulations, either by certain percentages that we need to, or by volume and rate. So in terms of that, we're reducing the runoff leaving the site. Utilities, we're going to be connecting to utilities that are located in Phelps Avenue, and then we're also going to be connecting into some utilities down here on Clifton. The sanitary sewer for the site, in general, you'll have the townhouse units will be flowing towards Phelps by gravity. The remainders of the site will be flowing by gravity to a pump station located here east of Building B, which will then be pumped over to an existing sanitary system in Clifton Avenue. We've had some preliminary discussions and continuing discussions with the city engineer, the water sewer department, concerning those connections and existing capacity, et cetera. So those have been ongoing at this point. The existing buildings, they'll be reconnected to these new utilities, because obviously when we're coming in here, we're changing the existing utilities. So these existing buildings will be reconnected to them. And I don't know if that's kind of covers the majority of it.
Got almost all of it. I was just going to ask you to touch on the proposed phasing for the project in terms of
Yes.
the order that's going to be going in, please.
I'm going to refer to plan entitled phasing plan. Now, this is part of the site plan set that I've submitted. I'm not sure if I need to mark this in as an exhibit, but this is sheet 4 of 26, which is the submitted site plan. The date on this is 4/13 of 22, last revised 5/24 of 22.
524?
Yes. Okay. Does this need to be?
If you're gonna refer to it,
Yeah.
call it A2, yeah.
All right, so on this exhibit, A1 is going to be building A of the the multi-use building over here, and including some of the shared parking that should be out in front of it, the amenity space, and the pool and lawn area of that building, multifamily building. Phase 1B would be all of the stacked townhomes, the 190 units located up here. Should mention that 1A, because of the stormwater management, would actually also include the stormwater management basin that's actually down here. It's kind of pretty far away, but that's actually part of the same phase. Once we get into phase 2, that's going to be the second part of the multifamily building, the remaining 262 units, and the drive-through building, 3,500 square foot drive-through building down here. And then the third phase would be the grosser 22,300 square foot building located over here and its associated parking. And then we had indicated on this phasing plan, future, which would be, any potential future development related to the existing buildings, but that's obviously not part of this submission.
Thank you. And then we had a comment in the review memoranda that we received asking about the security measures that are proposed for the structured parking. Can you just explain how that will work, please, for the residents?
Yep. Okay, so at the garage doors for these buildings, which again were located over here on the west side of Building A and located on the north and east side of Building B, those would have, my understanding, they'd have roll-up doors that would be card or some sort of access limited to the tenants.
Thank you. Mr. Savage, I know that when you were explaining the stormwater management plan for the property, you explained that the runoff will be reduced as compared to what exists today, but the impervious coverage on the site will also be reduced as compared to what's there today, correct?
Correct, yeah, I had mentioned that there is a decrease in the impervious coverage, on the site.
Thank you. And then the other comment I wanted to touch on in the review memoranda is there was a comment about the applicant taking on video inspection of the sanitary sewer main and also repairs of that sanitary sewer main. The applicant will take on the video inspection but cannot take on the repairs. Isn't that correct?
That's my understanding, yes.
Thank you. Those are all of my questions for Mr. Savage, but we're happy to have him take any questions from the board if you'd like, Mr. Chairman.
Just the question about building F and H, and on the previous plan, A2 that you showed, you talked about possible future development there.
Yeah.
Would that be limited to just possible retail development on those spots?
I mean, it would have to be in accordance with the zoning for that site. It's really just thrown in as a future. It's not part of this application. There are no plans for it.
Right. If any changes were anticipated for those pads, the applicant would return to the board.
My understanding is that all the roads in here are going to be told as privately owned, but that means privately maintained. Really, it doesn't mean they're just for the exclusive use of the residents here.
Correct.
Yes.
Correct.
Yeah. And they'll ultimately need, with the subdivision that was discussed before, they'll have to be cross-access easements between the sites, and everyone within this can access those areas within the site.
Another thing I think, maybe to explain, that my understanding is that the city would own and maintain the water lines, but not the sanitary and storm sewers, right? That would be the responsibility of that would be private. It's kind of weird. I didn't get quite.
Yeah, I mean, that's right now. This plan we haven't really gotten that far in that approval process and those discussions, so that's something that might, that could change. But, you know, in terms of the water on this property, there are a couple of large 20-inch water mains existing that come through the site, and just based upon the previous layout, would be underneath what would be buildings A and B. Those water mains are being relocated, basically, to run in our proposed driveway. Those are big, you know, trunk lines for water mains that this, you know, the city would want to control. The sanitary, I think, is a little less, you know, we're just gonna be collecting the buildings, we're going to a pump station. The applicant's going to be maintain and own the pump station. They'll have to hire a third party for maintenance and such, running that pump station. So that's still discussions at this point in terms of that final ownership.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Savage. We'll ask Mr. Minnow to join us, please. So we'd ask that Mr. Minnow please be sworn.
My name is David J. Minnow, M-I-N-N-O. I do.
Mr. Minnow, could you please introduce yourself to the board and the public and tell them about your experience and qualifications?
Sure. I'm president of Minnow and Wasco Architects and Planners. We're about a 97-person firm located both in Lambertville, New Jersey and Newark, New Jersey. And our firm specializes in high-density multifamily mixed-use projects around the state of New Jersey. I'm a registered architect in New Jersey and a planner, but tonight I'm only testifying as an architect. And I've testified in front of hundreds of boards for the last 30 years in New Jersey.
We'd ask that Mr. Minnow be accepted as an expert in architecture and a licensed architect. I almost said licensed architecture, not quite a building, and that he be allowed to provide testimony.
Accepted.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Minnow, tell us about the buildings that are being proposed.
Sure. Referring to the site plan A1, I'm primarily going to be talking tonight about buildings A and B on the site. And I'm really pleased to present these buildings. First, we're going to see some plans, which might be a little boring, but then you're going to get to see some beautiful renderings of these buildings, which I have to say Russo Development is one of the top developers in the state, and we've been the architect of 4 or 5 projects for Russo Development, and they always go beyond what we, even as architects, we expect, and they keep improving the buildings and the products and the materials. So they're in it for the long haul, and their buildings are really built to last. They don't cheap out on anything, either the exterior, interior, landscaping. So I'm really pleased to present this project to you because I think you'll be very happy with the result. What I'd like to do is briefly walk you through the plans, and I have some colored versions of what are part of my architectural set that was submitted. So I don't know whether these need to be marked or not.
If you're going to refer to them, please, that will be A3, I think we're starting at.
Mm-hmm.
And
Can you
Kate,
tell
I'm
me
going to
the
need to
date?
borrow a pen from you.
And could you also identify the date of the plans you referred to?
Sure. These plans are dated 4/22/22. Sorry, A3?
Yes.
That's correct.
Okay. So what we're looking at is sheet A-01 of my site, of my architectural plans. And we have, as was described, we have 2 levels of garages in each of the buildings, A and B. And this is the lower level. We're starting at the bottom, sort of the basement level below grade. You won't see this. But we have 2 garage elements. This garage is on building A is accessed by a ramp, which is entered off the left side of the building and comes down to this area. And then in Building B, we have a direct access because of the lower grade along that side. We can come right in. So there's no ramp interconnecting the garages in Building B. We have some bike storage located in the lower level of this garage, and you'll see it on the upper level of the A garage. We have elevators that come to this level to bring people up to their dwelling units directly from the garage. So now we're at the ground floor level, and this shows both buildings.
Mr. Miller, just for the sake of the record, can you tell us what page number you're on
I'm
now?
sorry, this is sheet A02.
Of Exhibit A3, correct?
I'm sorry?
Of Exhibit A3,
Correct.
correct? Thank you.
And what we're seeing here is the ground level, and you see in the gray, the upper levels of the garages, but facing Route 1, we have retail in the blue area on the ground floor. And you see our main drop-off here at the plaza. This is our main lobby with some amenities, and I'm going to show you a blow-up of this to show these spaces in just a minute. And we have some dwelling units located right along our outdoor amenity deck, which has a featured pool in that area. And I know our landscape architect's going to talk a great deal about these spaces, so I'm not going to dwell on it. But basically, I know there were some questions about how do deliveries occur. Packages are a big deal in residential communities, a lot of Amazon delivery and FedEx and the like. And that occurs right in this drop-off area brought to the lobby. And each building has its own separate package storage room. So a package gets delivered to the staff at the building, they place it in the package room, and people get a text message that they have a package. So when they get home from work or wherever, they pick up their package. It's a managed system, and we've learned over the years we have to keep making these bigger and bigger because people are getting more and more packages. Also, we have our mail rooms located with mail kiosks for each building. So let me move to the blow-up of the amenity spaces. And if you've ever seen a Russo residential building, you'll know that they're a wild space. As you come in, we have a feature. I'm referring to sheet A-02.1, which is a blow-up of the ground floor of the residential buildings. We have a beautiful feature stairway as you come in, main reception desk. Our leasing area is located conveniently in the lobby space. We have some co-working space, which is a very popular amenity, and especially with post-COVID now, people have learned to work at home, but they also want a place to get out of their apartment and have some special rooms that they can go in. Some of them are video conference rooms that are set up for Zoom meetings, that type of thing. So people really appreciate those spaces as well as conference areas. We have a lounge here and then a beautiful club room type lobby, which will be full of beautiful furniture that will function as a party area leading out to the outdoor amenity space. I might mention that we do have a service corridor behind the retail for those retail spaces to be serviced along the backside with entries on either side of the building. And then there are private terraces for these residential buildings, or units right along the main outdoor amenity area. Next sheet is sheet A-03, which is the second floor plan. And here you see the building become pretty much a residential double-loaded corridor building. We have these beautiful wings that jut into these C-shaped courtyards, which people in the upper levels love the views into those courtyards that are passive and landscaped in a very beautiful way. Again, you'll hear more about that. But we continue the amenity spaces up to the second level, and I'm going to show you the next plan is a blow-up of those amenity spaces. It's sheet A-3.1. So what we have upstairs, as you've come up that main stairway or the elevators on either side, we have a gym space, which is up on the second level over the main lobby. This is all glass looking out to the pool deck, and we have an outdoor terrace area off of that gym. We have yoga and stretching spaces as well as gym equipment. We have more co-working space here, and this is a private dining area. So many times people will have a demonstration chef come in and cook meals for people in a private dining setting, and people can reserve that who live in the building. And then we have restrooms located here. And lastly, these are the upper level residential plans, the third and fourth residential levels, sheet 8.-04. And again, the only difference here is that the residential units now continue over top of the amenity space in the center. Diego, do you have the renderings for me? What I'd like to do now is describe the exterior of the buildings using a few perspective renderings. Okay. So I guess we should mark these. I don't think they're part of the submission set. So,
A4, please.
A4.
And today's date. And Mr. Miller, just tell us what we're looking at for purposes of
Okay.
identifying the exhibit.
We're looking at our main front entry to the building. Here's the drop-off, the circular drop-off in front. And what you see are very exciting residential spaces and this mixed-use environment that we hope is very active. You see the sidewalk areas are large enough to have cafe dining for restaurant spaces along those retail stores in the front. Our main residential entry coming into the project is right here. And you see the use of a variety of materials. We have two types of what are called glass reinforced concrete exterior pieces. Those are, I'll give you an example. This area here right around the main entry is created out of that material. It's a very high quality lasting material. We have two colors of metal panel. We have a composite wood panel that you see used here. We have two colors of brick. We have a lighter colored brick here, and then we have a darker gray manganese brick that we use in certain locations. Here you see some of the reddish brick. Here you see the step back at the upper level, creating some private terraces off of those upper units. A great device for people to have some additional balcony space on those buildings. So the windows are high quality windows. They're a Geldwin residential window and aluminum storefront on the lower level. We use anodized aluminum railings for the balcony railings that you see. So a great palette of contemporary materials. And we think that this style of architecture is attractive to really the two groups that we expect here, younger professionals and older empty nesters. Both are being well educated in design and they're responding to architecture like this. Let me move to the next. So this is a daytime rendering of the front looking more from Route 1. You're a little bit further away. You see more of the expansive building. You see one of our pad restaurant sites out in front here. And here you see a little bit larger stretch of the building.
Mr. Miller, I'm sorry, can you just mark this as A5 for us before you get going?
All right, A5.
Thank you.
So one of the things that we really wanted to create from Route 1 is a building that's not boxy apartment buildings. So we have, you can see how the cornice line is jumping along the frontage. The materials change. There's shadow line both horizontally and vertically. Very attractive tuck-in balconies and then some hung balconies here. So there's a lot of variety here, but I think it's composed in a way that makes a great composition for the site. I think that's all we have, yeah. So this really sort of ends my direct testimony. If there are any questions you might have about the architecture. One thing I wanted to answer that were in the review letters was a screening of the mechanical equipment. We have parapets on the roof, and our mechanical equipment is actually pretty low. It's basically residential style condensing units, and those are located down the center of the roof over the corridors of the double-loaded corridor. So people either driving or pedestrians around the buildings will not see the mechanical equipment just because it's located in the center of the roof and there is some parapet on the rooftop to screen that. So we think that that mechanical equipment is hidden very well.
And Mr. Minot, I know our engineer touched on it, but can you just explain how trash and recycling will work in the buildings, please?
Sure. Each of the residential floors has a trash room with a chute for trash and containers for recycling. And those are brought down or come down a chute to the trash termination room in the garages, and there's 4 of them. And building management brings that trash out or the containers for recycling at a very scheduled time on trash pickup day. This is all private hauler, so it's building managed. The trash doesn't sit out there for hours. It's a very tight schedule of when those people come and pick up the trash and recycling. So it works very well. And Russo's really worked on how to keep that going as a system in the residential buildings.
Thank you, Mr. Minot. I don't have any further questions for you, but we're happy to respond to questions from the board.
I have just one. The interior courtyards, are they accessible to residents, or are they more to look at?
No, they're accessible. Yeah, in fact, they're used. And I don't want to steal the landscape architect's thunder. He's going to show you some good detail and color and the plant materials that are in there and how they're designed. So, yeah, there's a lot to them. And that's really one of the things that make these communities, again, in a post-COVID environment, people like to work outside. So the outdoor courtyards are Wi-Fi compatible. People can go do their work on nice days out in those courtyards. So, good question. Thank you very much.
Okay, next I'd ask Mr. Seckfield to join us, Mr. Seckler to join us. Okay, can we please have Mr. Seckler sworn?
Matthew Seckler, that's S-E-C-K-L-E-R. Yes, I do.
Okay, Mr. Seckler, can you please introduce yourself to the board and the public and tell them about your experience and credentials as a traffic engineer?
Certainly. I'm a principal at Stonefield Engineering Design. Our address is 92 Park Avenue in Rutherford, New Jersey. Bachelor of Science in Civil Engineering from Union College in Schenectady, New York. A Master's in City Regional Planning from the Blaston School in Rutgers, just around the corner. I've been practicing in the field of traffic engineering for over 15 years. I'm a licensed professional engineer and professional planner in the state. I'm also recognized professional traffic operations engineer by the Institute of Transportation Engineers.
Thank you. We'd ask that Mr. Seckler be accepted as an expert in traffic engineering, please.
Your qualifications are accepted.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Okay, Mr. Seckler, can you please tell us about traffic on site and anticipated ingress and egress?
Certainly, I'll take you through this. Don't worry, I put up one of the old pictures that we had up here. This was the colorized site plan.
This is Exhibit A1 for the record.
For the record. And the last 2 witnesses gave a lot of explanation regarding the proposed conditions of the site. And I'll get there with my traffic testimony, but I think what's important is to remember the existing conditions that are on the site, or really the pre-existing conditions when this site was in full operation. The site, to remind everybody, has 2 curb cuts along Route 1, 2 right-in, right-out driveways, and the access at the back onto Labor Center Way and Phelps Avenue at that 4-way intersection. The site previously was occupied by a Sears. The buildings itself, including the main building and the auto building, appeared to be constructed back in the 1960s. I don't know if it was Sears that whole way through. But obviously, when you look at the amount of parking they had on the site, at points when it was busy, I imagine that Sears generated a significant amount of traffic. One aspect about retail-type traffic is that it tends to have continuous turnover. So people may be, you may have cars coming to the site, on a Saturday from 10 in the morning all the way to 5 p.m., 6 p.m. at night, just continually turning over the parking spaces. When I talk about our traffic study, it's important to remember that aspect of it, although the Sears obviously has not been busy for quite a while. It's now not open at all or fenced up. But it's important to remember that this site was designed to accommodate large levels of traffic being generated utilizing the 2 site driveways on Route 1 and the 1 access driveway out the rear of the site. In terms of our traffic study, we prepared a traffic study and sent it and submitted to the board. Included within that was traffic counts that we conducted back in February, included counts that were conducted during your morning and evening rush hour time periods, as well as your Saturday time period in the middle of the day, which is your typical kind of like retail peak period where people are running their errands throughout the day. It's important to note that even though we're in this kind of COVID, post-COVID world, we check back at counts that were done along Riders Lane prior to COVID, back in I think 2018 the DOT did, and our counts at the intersection of Labor Center Way and Riders Lane basically match up to those counts. So February seems to be indicative of what is now a standard typical traffic patterns for this general community and area, and we made sure we did the counts while Rutgers was in session. We actually started this project well before February, missed out on winter break, there was some COVID outbreaks here or there, made sure Rutgers was in full session when we did our counts in February. So we performed our counts, and then what we did is we looked at what the level of traffic that be generated from this proposed development. And we have a mix of uses on the site. We have 2 existing uses that'll stay, the 2 restaurants along Route 1. We are adding the proposed drive-through fast food restaurant user up at near Route 1, the retail building that may be a grocer, that was building C, the mixed-use buildings A and B, and the townhouses in the rear. And we basically utilizing the Institute of Transportation Engineers, which is the definitive source for projecting traffic, determine what the overall traffic would be generated from this site. It's important to note that is actually less than what a typical Sears, when it was busy, or your typical about 100,000 square foot retail establishment. You think of what would be built on that type of model, if Target or Walmart or something like that, of that kind of ilk, because that's what Sears was of its time, would generate significantly more traffic than the traffic that we are proposing to generate from this site. So we're actually bringing traffic down from what could reoccupy the building or what may have been popular in the 80s and 90s in this Sears site. Also to note is the type of traffic is a little different. Again, retail tends to kind of turn over significantly. This is obviously a mix of uses. So we do have the residential, which really generally sees people leaving in the morning, returning at night. Maybe you run some errand throughout the day, but a lot less turnover than you would see with just a pure retail establishment. So also important to note that this style design, mixed-use design, much like you see in the downtown portions of New Brunswick, it's designed to help reduce the amount of trips on the outward roadways. By providing retail establishments, restaurants, grocers, some sort of food restaurants along with the 2 existing food restaurants, it helps keep some of the traffic on the site itself. People who live upstairs, they need to go get some food, maybe they go to the restaurant downstairs. Maybe some of these retail establishments is a nail salon, so someone goes there instead of getting in their car and driving elsewhere. Same thing with the grocer, and obviously we know the proliferation of delivery services and things like that, helping create a community here that doesn't necessarily require the use of an automobile. In addition, the applicant does provide on all their sites shuttle service to mass transportation. They operate themselves. It's basically used. The more people that use it, the more service they provide. So if they need to get 2 vans because the first van's filling up, they provide a second van. So the shuttle service would likely run between here and the train station. May also, depending on the usage, run between here and perhaps maybe Tower Center for the bus service in that area. So again, this is a site that, while it is not, I would say, as well located in terms of mass transit compared to many other places within the city, by having this connection, that last mile connection it's called, basically, to provide that shuttle helps keep one individual cars off the road. It helps maintain a little bit lower levels of car ownership. That said, our parking supply is sufficient. It meets the ordinance standards, so we do have sufficient parking. That includes the resident-only parking, the retail-only parking fields, and then that mixed kind of shared areas where some overflow residential, some guest residential, and the overflow retail would all intermingle on some of those outer lots on the site. So overall, from a traffic perspective, we are actually seeing a decrease in the amount of traffic compared to what a typical thriving, operating retail building that is on the site today would generate. We think the type of uses is well designed to help keep some of those travel trips on site, so people be kind of walking to and from the various uses on the site. And we are utilizing the existing driveways and curb cuts that have existed for what looks like 40, 50 years on these highways and connections, which obviously have been able to support this development over the last few decades. So overall, from a traffic engineering perspective, we believe the site has been designed efficiently and effectively in terms of off-site. On-site, you heard the design standards. This is designed to meet, I would say, the latest demands. Drop-off pickup areas for your Ubers or Lyfts. Lots of delivery or loading areas for your Uber Eats, DoorDash, Amazon deliveries. All that is basically provided on site. So this is, the latest and greatest in what people are looking for with their multifamily buildings, as opposed to having to retrofit older buildings. This site's been designed with that in mind.
Thank you, Mr. Steckler. I don't have further questions for you, but if the board has any, we're happy to respond.
I think that I know that there was a recommendation associated with the redevelopment plan for some kind of a public transportation element. I think that was addressed here in the shuttle service that you're providing.
Yes.
And I'm pretty sure, and if I didn't, I should have. In terms of the landscaping, are you the right person to talk about that?
Probably not, but I
Is there someone else?
He's coming next.
Oh, okay, then no, forget that.
Okay. All right. Without further ado, we'll do landscaping. Mr. Tronco. Okay, we would ask that Mr. Tronco please be sworn.
Jason Tronco, Tronco, Malillo and Bauer. I do.
Okay, Mr. Tronco, please introduce yourself to the board and the public and tell them about your experience and credentials.
I'm a landscape architect at Malillo, Bauer, and Carmen for the last 24 years. I have a bachelor in landscape architecture from West Virginia University. Testified in numerous boards in New Jersey. I've been qualified as an expert in landscape architecture. I'm a professional planner by exam. That's pretty much it.
We'd ask that you be accepted as a landscape architect, please.
Accepted, thank you.
Thank you. All right, Mr. Tronco, why don't you tell us about the landscaping that's being proposed as well as the deviations that the applicant requires for
Okay.
landscaping?
In regard to the waivers, they're mostly landscape architecture in nature. Kate did a fabulous job of explaining them. She really did. She, gave the reasons, most of the reasons why we are requesting these waivers. The first one, in regard to street trees, she mentioned we have 300 trees associated with the streets on this project. Most every single street, drive aisle, parking area is lined with street trees. And we do that because we like to create tree-lined streets within the developments. There's slight deviations. If I could use the exhibit A1. In this area along the eastern property line, there's an existing buffer to the residential properties. Also in that area is a retaining wall that's proposed fairly close to the curb line. So there's a few areas next to the parallel parking spaces that we won't have the shade trees. In that area, we are proposing shrubs and evergreen trees to supplement that buffer. One of the other areas is at the back of the multifamily. As you can see here, there's 10, 12, 15 trees across there, but there's a couple areas that exceed 70 feet spacing. And that's due to the pull-offs and parallel parking spaces along that run. And that's only on the south side of that thoroughfare there at the street. The other area, if I can remember what it was, it's internal to the alleys within, so the townhomes have rear-loaded garages, and we consider them alleys, and between driveways, it's a fairly narrow area. it's about 3.5 feet between the driveways. So it's just not appropriate to put trees in those areas for snow plowing and everything. But we really don't consider that a street. That's more of an access way for the back of the townhomes. In regard to foundation landscaping, this is a requirement where all the buildings should have landscaping around the periphery. That happens on all the buildings throughout the development, with the exception of the front of what potentially can be the food store. That's paved with decorative pavers. That's good for access and carts and all the same. At the rear of that building, which would be the north side, there's service-oriented activities happening there. Drop off of materials and trash and everything, so that's also not landscaped with foundation material. One other area where that occurs is at G, which would be the pad site. Again, we developed that with outdoor seating, decorative pavement, access to the building and such. So on the north and east side of that building, there's not proposed foundation planting. Parking lot landscaping is the next waiver. Your ordinance requires 10% gross parking area to be landscaped. As you can see, the periphery of all the parking areas are landscaped, with the exception of the existing condition along the western property. We have street trees within those parking lot islands. The perimeters planted with shrubs, ground cover, ornamental trees, shade trees to provide that screening. So that's just a slight deviation in regard to the number, the percentage number of landscaped areas within the parking lots. Kate went through the percentages. Parking lot to a property line was the existing condition. Parking lot to the right-of-way buffer, that occurs in this small area adjacent to Phelps. We didn't put the periphery of those parallel parking spaces with a hedge. We could totally do that. We thought wide open lawns, a wide open lawn area with the shade trees was just a better design for that area. It's more in keeping with the continuity of the streetscape that we create. We didn't consider it a parking lot. And that pretty much kind of pops through the waivers that we are requesting. I would like to mention that the buffer to Clifton Avenue has been enhanced. So Sean mentioned, Kate mentioned, we were going through there and clearing a lot of the dead and damaged trees, but in addition to that, we're putting in a good amount of plant material. If I can recall offhand, it was 30 shade trees and 55 evergreen trees, along with like 140 shrubs. So we're really bulking up that buffer there. As Dave mentioned, we have a lot of exciting amenities, throughout the development. The courtyard has a pool for the multifamily building, passive recreation, places to gather, shade structures, dining areas. Up on the second floor of both building A and B, we also have passive recreation. It has some of the same uses, dining areas, gathering areas, fire pits, and the same. Adjacent to the townhomes, we have the child play area, which was a nice feature. To have the neighbors have a place for their children to play. Also a central seating area that's located in the open space. And a dog, as Sean has mentioned, we have a dog run adjacent to Phelps, pretty good size, small, accommodate small dogs, large dogs, and it's just a great feature for the community.
Thank you, Mr. Tronco. I don't have further questions for you, but if any board have questions, we're happy to respond.
Thank you.
I have a question. You first.
I think we're going to ask the same questions. You go first.
I'm pretty sure that in the kind of the discussion or review of the redevelopment plan, which I think was a meeting of January, that I kind of stressed that related to the composition of the vegetation.
Oh, sure.
That although there's no legal requirement for this,
Kate mentioned, we have a comprehensive landscape plan here. It's really robust in the planting. We use native adaptive plant material that's going to provide habitat, pollinator species. So all of the plant list is native material, native to the local area of New Jersey. Should have hit on that. Should have.
That was it.
Sorry.
Guess that's it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Those are all of our witnesses, Mr. Chairman.
Let's proceed to opening this up for to the public. Again, just stressing, okay. Number of folks. Just stressing that these are comments relevant to this particular application only, at this part of the portion of the meeting. Okay, who do we got?
All right, so if anyone is interested in addressing the board on this application, please, I guess, raise your hand, then I'll add you to the list.
I'd like to be an objector, please.
All right, let's just jot you down for a second, Mr. Croswell, and then I'll go through everybody and then we can come back to that, if that's all right. Danielle Moore.
Yes.
Tony Elridge.
Tony.
Elridge, E-L-D-R-I-D-G-E.
Okay. Tom Calzo. Anyone else?
Amber Saravia, S-A-R-A-V-I-A. V-I-A.
Someone else?
Patricia Baumler.
Spell that. Spell that. B-R-O-M.
Where?
B-E-L.
Hi,
Wait,
Name?
wait a second.
name please?
No, wait a second. I'm getting her
Oh.
spelling. B-O-M-B-E-L-Y-N. Thank you.
Thank you.
Name please, sir?
I'm sorry?
Your name?
James Sika, S-I-C-A. Sheriff.
All right, Mr. Croswell, please proceed with the.
Yeah, so similar to the last application, I did want to put some objections on the record, but I also want to have the letter that I submitted be a part of this record and clarify that under your rules, I have a right to be an objector, which allows me to present a case, including calling witnesses and presenting evidence. And
Just a minute, we have quite a number of people here who are gonna present, I want to take that into consideration. I hope you're not gonna be, once again, addressing the qualifications of the people on the board. I just don't think it's appropriate question to ask at a meeting at this kind of venue,
fair enough, no questions, but for the record, I do want to, lodge my objections and respectfully, no disrespect to anyone here, just state my objections.
Sure.
I'll proceed with that. So I do object to Class 4 members who hold other offices with the municipality participating today. Also object to Ms. Sikora Ludwig participating since she's already declared her position in favor of the applicant. I did submit that letter and wanted to be very clear that I want to be an objector and be able to call one witness and present 4 documents into evidence, and I can be as brief as I can, but if there's a 5-minute time limit, it's going to be.
Are these witnesses that are scheduled or who raise their hand and are going to testify?
None of those folks. The only witness I'd like to call is Mr. Dominguez.
That's pretty regular.
I'll note in the letter I presented that.
I haven't seen the letter, but basically your letter is stating that you're kind of registering as an objector, is that correct?
And I did ask Mr. Dominguez for a document. He prepared a memo with regard to this site, this development. It came up at the Housing Authority last week. I asked for a copy of it so that I could review it before tonight, and I didn't get a copy of it. So that's one reason I'd like to be able to ask him questions. And I think it's, under your rules, it's acceptable for me to call him as a witness. He's here.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, so it's one thing for a member of the public or an objector to call their own witnesses. The concern about a member of the public asking the board's professional staff to serve as a witness is that actually does have a risk of, if it's just an inquiry, that's fine, but if he's asking the member of the staff to provide testimony in support of his objection, that would potentially create a conflict. Because then they're being asked to wear two hats, one serving the board and one serving an objector. So it depends on the nature of the inquiry that Mr. Cradaville, if he's expecting Mr. Dominguez to testify in objection to the application, that would be a concern. If he's asking a question seeking general information, I suppose I don't have an objection to it.
Mr. Chairman, if I could, as before, can we just get to the point? What is the nature of your objection?
Certainly. Happy to do that. So the questions for Mr. Dominguez would be with regard to that memo and why it wasn't provided, what it contains, and also this statement that I found on the city website, July 8th, Housing Authority selects redeveloper for Sears site. So those would be the two items that I'd want to ask him about, and that's all.
Those are established facts. They have been named as the redeveloper. You don't have to introduce any evidence to that point. We know they're the named redeveloper. If you've asked for a document from us under an OPRA and you haven't gotten it yet, okay, that's an acceptable fact. But what has that got to do? How is that relevant to this application? Sorry, how is that relevant to your objection to this application?
So the planning department prepared a memo with respect to this site, and I asked for it not under OPRA, but under this proceeding in an email that I've now provided to the board, and I didn't get it, so I didn't get any response, as a matter of fact, and I wanted to learn more about what is in that memo. And also, I'm not disputing that the Housing Authority did designate the redeveloper, but I had some questions about these comments in the...
As before, how is that relevant? I beg your pardon, Mr. Chairman. How is that relevant to your objection to this application? I got to ask. It's a conforming application. They've asked for some waivers. What do you have to say to object to the criteria that the board would consider in determining whether this application should be approved or not?
Yes, so my questions go to the designation of redeveloper under the redevelopment plan and the process that led to that happening.
And this board didn't do that.
Right, but the redevelopment plan you did do.
The designation of them as redeveloper was done by the city council, and the adoption of the redevelopment plan was done by the city council.
I know, this just talks about 2018, and so I wanted to ask questions about the timeline.
Mr. Solomon, just for FYI, the redevelopment authority, Brunswick Housing Authority was the redeveloper designation entity, not the city council. Just
right. The point being, it wasn't this board. So go ask that board why they did what they did. I don't know why you're asking this board and what it has to do with the nature of this application.
Sure. I wanted to ask about the proposals that were received and what led to the redevelopment plan being crafted the way it was crafted, specifically without a requirement for on-site affordable housing, which is my big beef with the application.
And I'm sure those are perfectly reasonable questions of the appropriate board, not this board, because it doesn't have anything to do with the jurisdiction of this board and the criteria that this board would use in determining whether the application should be approved or not. This board has, for example, you mentioned affordable housing. This board has no control over affordable housing in the city of Brunswick.
Well, you did produce and sign off on the redevelopment plan, which was what I was going to get to with my questions.
And respectfully, the plan has already been adopted by the city council and is not the question before the board this evening.
Okay, well, perhaps I'll find another time to ask Mr. Dominguez questions if the board doesn't see fit for that to take place.
You haven't received a response to your request, hopefully you will. I don't know what to say.
It's unfortunate. I did specify I wanted it for tonight so that I could have at least 24 hours to review it and potentially introduce it, potentially, have more information. I don't know what's in the memo, so it's unfortunate. But I'll proceed without that, and it sounds like you're denying my request to call Mr. Dominguez as a witness.
Yeah, I don't think that's a great idea.
Okay. Fair enough. I will, I do want to clarify whether I'm going to be time limited or not.
Yes, I believe you will be.
Okay, and what is the time limit, since you said it, Mr. Chair?
5 minutes.
Okay, so just want to be clear, I'm not I'm not being allowed to object under section D, which has no time limit. I'm being told that I have to fit all my comments and questions into 5 minutes under section F.
Mr. Crowell, you don't have any witnesses though this evening, correct?
But I do have evidence to introduce, and I would like to question some of your witnesses about these things, so.
Then do so.
Okay, but I just want to be clear, it's not happening under section D with no time limits, happening under section F, which is for interested parties to give public commentary. There's a difference, and there's an order of operations. The reason I stood up first is not because I think I'm the most important person here, it's because I want to follow the rules, and the objectors go first, and they get to make a case, and then it's opened up to interested parties to give public commentary, and frankly, I would like to do both, but it sounds like you're going to make me only do the latter and not allow the first. Is that?
Yes, that's my preference. I prefer that you restrict your comments and questions and questions to others to a 5-minute time period like everyone.
Okay. Well, for the record, I think that's the wrong decision. I will proceed. I have 3 documents to introduce. I'll just actually give you them all at once to save time. So these are documents from the applicant's application for a long-term tax exemption. It is the apartment rent assumptions, the 30-year pilot projections, and the comparable apartments study. Before I get there, I do have some questions for the witnesses. Mr. Savage said 198 townhomes. I had thought it was going to be 190 townhomes. Can he clarify the number?
I said 190.
190, okay. Do want to clarify, he said, quote, sort of planned to be a grocery. It's fair to say there's no tenant lined up and no guarantee that there will be a grocer operating there?
The building's designed to be suitable to a grocer, but there is not a grocer that's committed to the building as of yet.
Okay. With regard to the private roads, you touched on this, Mr. Chair. Why can't the roads be public? I know there's some HOAs in New Brunswick where there's real problems with keeping the roads up.
I would have thought that would be an advantage to having private roads because of the cost savings to the city. That's kind of the way I looked at it. If they are, why would the city want to take on the burden of maintaining the streets on the path that is often used?
So will it be their sole responsibility, or will it be an HOA responsible for the roads?
Based on my understanding, it would be the responsibility of the developer.
So, if I may, Mr. Chairman, the developer will be responsible for the majority of the roads. The roads that are internal to the townhome development will be the homeowner association's responsibility, but of course the developer will maintain ownership of the remainder of the property, and there's an easement agreement that governs how those roads will be maintained as between the two of them.
Thank you. Mr. Seckler mentioned the shuttle service. Is there a set place where people would get picked up or dropped off? Is there going to be a shelter? I didn't see one in the plans.
I don't believe there is one established yet. However, I imagine they would use the drop-off pickup area loop that's basically between building A and building B.
Okay. I have some more questions on that topic. How many hours a day or days a week might the shuttle service run? Is this something that would only be for rush hour commuters in the mornings and the early evenings, or is this something that would be consistent throughout the day?
Typically, they begin them with the rush hour commute hours, so typically 3 or 4 hours in the morning, 3 or 4 hours in the evening. However, they do adjust them based on tenant demand. If they get requests to run different routes or different time periods, they have done that at other locations.
Okay. And there's no guarantee where it will go. I heard the train station and potentially Tower Center in East Brunswick. Is there any guarantee there'll be connectivity to the Rutgers campus, to downtown New Brunswick, or to other neighborhoods?
So again, it's based on tenant demand. So if we find that enough, tenants are asking for a route to the Rutgers campus or elsewhere within the city, then that would be provided.
And who can use it? Is this only for tenants who live in the buildings or the townhomes? Or could I write it if I want to go to the future grocery store and back?
It's a tenant amenity.
So this will not be open to the public. So this is not public transit.
Correct.
Okay, well, I do want to draw your attention to the exhibits I gave you. Cheapest unit in this place, we're talking $1,690 average rent for a studio apartment. This is wholly out of step with what people in New Brunswick can afford. Specifically, if you look at the comparable apartments study, Tove Manor is the closest apartment, and you look at their prices. A one-bedroom goes for $1,216. Less expensive than a studio. This is really jacking up the prices for people, and I don't think that this will do much good for the people of New Brunswick. It might do good for people from outside New Brunswick. We need affordable housing, and a site like this, of such a large magnitude, a 36-acre site, is a huge missed opportunity to actually address the housing crisis. Instead, this applicant is doing the opposite and exploiting the site for the maximum possible revenue and not even providing a simple thing like public transportation. I think that this is going to be an exclusive enclave that will exclude people, the people of New Brunswick from it, and it will actually further stratification, segregation, and gentrification in our city, and it should be rejected. Thank you.
Just with regard to the affordable housing thing, my limited understanding of this is that there can be the city of New Brunswick is essentially exempt from this requirement. It can't demand that it be part of these projects. And I also understand that there is some contribution that is going to be made that could be used for that is to be used for these purposes. I don't know the extent of it and that sort of thing, but perhaps you want to just comment.
Certainly, Mr. Chairman. So firstly, you are correct. The redevelopment plan does not provide for affordable housing to be included on site as part of this development. And of course, the redeveloper intends to adhere to the redevelopment plan that the City Council approved. However, the redeveloper has agreed to provide a contribution to the Housing Authority to be put into a fund that can be used to implement affordable housing within the city. And that is a term of the financial agreement between the redeveloper and the city, which has now been adopted by ordinance and signed by the city and the redeveloper, and that requires a payment of north of $1 million. It's $1,080,000 that the redeveloper will be making, and then that will be implemented towards, but really however the city and the Housing Authority determine is appropriate to best serve the city's affordable housing objectives.
I'll just note that's less than 1 month's rent. $1,500 per unit is the number they're doing. They're charging more than that the first month. I'd also like to just enter into the record your rules, 2 pages of your rules that unfortunately were not followed tonight. So give this to the attorney.
I have a copy.
All right, next up would be Patricia Bombolin.
I don't mind if I go
No,
last.
it's just that Charlie continued on for where he was, but typically we do it in alphabetical order, so that would be.
That wasn't the way you took the names, come on. I take no objection if you follow the order you took the names, doesn't matter to me.
Do you have any objection to just following the order of name taking?
I know.
None. Ms. Moore,
Go ahead.
you can proceed.
Now, no disrespect to you,
No,
but like I said,
no
please,
offense.
like I said, no disrespect to you,
No,
but like I said,
of
I
course
can't
not.
sit down too long due to where I done missed my time already. No disrespect to you. I just can't sit
Not
down
at
for a
all.
long time.
Ms. Moore, you were here supposed to be answering.
Yes, Danielle Moore. My first question is, please, if you can tell me, okay, you said $1,690 starting. Is there going to be a maintenance fee for each resident that stays in a unit?
So well, to my knowledge, the rental apartments will not have a maintenance fee. They just pay their rent. And then with regard to the townhomes, those are for sale units. And as part of being a member of the homeowners association, they will have monthly maintenance fees.
So basically, due to where, and one thing that I'm concerned about, due to where I say you shall not vote until you really get the full district of the layout of what the situation is with the water and the sewer, just like every townhouse, Renaissance, and the other ones on corner of George Street and Paul Robeson Boulevard, due to where they're all required to maintenance what water main break, sewage. The city is not responsible in doing, and like I said, until you get that in writing, due to where I say you don't need to vote on this. Then one thing, if you can also tell me is, well, how many people are allowed in a unit? How many people are allowed to stay in a unit? Without killing my time, if you could just give me a simple number, please, thank you.
I can't give you a simple number, but I can tell you that the state has statutes that govern the number of permitted occupancy.
Well, I surely hope so, due to where New Brunswick is already overpopulated, already being lied from the city council and the mayor, President Ludwig saying, wow, there's only close to, 55,000 residents in New Brunswick? That is a lie. Like I said, I've been here 45 years. I walk, I get around New Brunswick, and I see much more than you do when driving. And to see 620 kids graduate from New Brunswick High School just out of 12th grade alone, please, that is certainly a lie. And like I said, wow, you're saying even 2 people in each unit. New Brunswick is already overpopulated. Like I said, I know quite a few of you, I'm not going to say here, are being paid under the table. Oh, I can see things. I have special vision, which I prove to the city as well. Due to we're wild to go to housing authority first. They vote no. Then city council to vote. Oh, yes, then go back to the housing authority. Then you vote no again. And then wow, we're back here with your vote. And then wow, with them then also voting yes again? Come on, somebody's being paid. But like I said, the Lord is watching you, where money's not going to save you in every way, but you keep doing the wrong thing. Come on, for as many votes to go through with this, please. And like I said, mainly for all the ones on the housing authority to vote no and then change their answer to yes. Wow, that's already showing, like I said, and like I said at the meeting, wow, quite a few are being paid to do this. And like I said, money's not everything. And like I said, New Brunswick needs much more affordable housing due to where you have extremely too much homelessness going on in New Brunswick, people sleeping on the sidewalks down to the river. Come on. Like I said, I don't even think any of you really care about New Brunswick. All you really do is care about your pockets, the money going in your pocket, and never doing the right thing or investigating anything before something's being done. Because like I said, come on. It is overpopulated, with traffic as well, due to motor vehicle crash, someone's getting hit every day in New Brunswick. Why? Because the police department doesn't do their jobs. Too much crime. Come on, enough. We don't need any more units in New Brunswick. Now, come on, please. And like I said, even though I know you guys are going to always just vote yes, none of you really investigate anything goes on. Same thing with city council. But I have to say half the stuff that goes wrong is with the city council voting yes because they don't investigate things before they do something. And like I said, until you get the writing and with the situation with the water and the sewage, which is a main concern with New Brunswick, with backing up, please, I hope you, even though, like I said, no need to even ask you, because like I said, I already know what your answer is going to be with all of you. Like I said, I do have psychic vision. But like I said, come on, stop thinking about money. Do the right thing for New Brunswick residents. Stop thinking about money. That's all I have to say. Thank you. Good night.
Good job. Thank you, Ms. Moore. Good job.
Okay, next up is, and I botched this, but Tony.
Okay. Name is Tony Eldridge, Eldridge. Okay.
You swear to tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do. Thank you guys for allowing us to speak. I appreciate that. I live on the corner of Clifton and Cotter, okay, which is right behind the location where this development will take place. Specifically, I am right behind where the old auto center is. Okay?
Speak up, could you get in here and speak up for the mic right there? Thank you, appreciate it.
Yes, as I was saying, I live on the corner of Cotter and Clifton Avenue. Okay? And I want to say that I'm not totally opposed to this development. Okay? I would like to see improvements in New Brunswick. However, I think that the improvements should come with some value-added initiatives for the community. Okay? And what I am very startled about is the fact that I don't see, what I expected to see, which would be true diligence by the people in front of me in doing their homework to make sure that real value added is brought along with this development. Okay? As was stated clearly here, okay, that the infrastructure, in particular to the electric grid, the water and sewer, okay, will not be improved beyond where we presently have it. Okay? I've called the city and mayor's office several times over the last 3 or 4 years about one particular problem, okay? And that's the sewer line that runs from Sears over in front of my house that stinks up the place, okay? And all they've given me is lip service, that they would come, clean it out every month, and throw some cherry bombs to get rid of the odor. And what I've heard tonight is the very same thing, okay? That the developer will bestow on us the ability to get some cameras in and check the lines. Totally unacceptable. I live there, my family lives there, I have 3 kids, okay? One of the basic things about any development, okay, is what they bring to the community. In particular, the infrastructure, an improvement on the infrastructure, okay? There's no reason why the existing sewer line that comes from Sears should be used by the 270 plus units that's being additionally added there. That should be closed off, and more importantly, they should, New Brunswick that is, should improve the sewer line in that area. They're not doing that. They're not going to add more to that line, okay? Totally, totally unacceptable, okay? And secondly, where the grocery is going to be built, okay? It's in the northeastern portion of that development, which is where the auto center presently is, okay?
Which is what is?
Auto Center, Sears Auto Center. Now, it's nice that, we're getting some amenities like, some trees being planted, some grass being, laid, But the real infrastructure for which I'm referring to is, what's being done with the sewer and what's being done with the health of the environment, that community, okay? There should be a retaining wall right before the gorge on the other side of that fence, preventing any type of rats, rodents, or whatever it is that's going to be stacked where those dumpsters were clearly defined to be, okay? I don't know if anyone here has any skin in the game, but I'm going to be living there. My family's going to be living there, okay? And I think one of the basic things this committee should have done, okay, and it doesn't seem like everyone started by the fact that he stated that all they're going to do is put a camera in and look into those pipes. That's unacceptable. I need a retaining wall, and I need that sewer line that's coming over to be shut off. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next is Mr. Tom Kelso.
Thomas F. Kelso, K-E-L-S-O.
Do you swear or affirm to tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
Sure I do, thank you. First of all, obviously familiar with the procedure here, but I'm here not as a lawyer, I'm here as a resident. I live at 15 Clifton Avenue, which is the third house in from Route 18, right where the buffer area. I've been a resident there for 40 years. Raised my kids there, now my grandkids are running all over the place there. And I want to make it clear, I do not represent Russo Development. I've never represented them. The only time I've ever really had contact with them was when I learned about this project. But I have had an opportunity to meet on site on a few occasions with their representatives, the landscape architect, their site people. Mr. Russo himself came out and walked with me. And the thing that I've had a concern about, but I want to make clear, I support this project. I think this is a great project. I think it's great for the city. Obviously, there's a lot of unknown that gives residents fear, and that's understandable. I've been, as a land use attorney, I've been in that situation many times, and I know there's a fear of the unknown. But my reaction to my interaction with Russo is, I think they're straight. They have spent a lot of time with me, with others in the neighborhood where we have walked that buffer area, not only Clifton Avenue, but along Cotter Drive, and it is really in very bad condition. And having been there for 40 years, I've seen it go through a transformation, because early on, Sears was a good neighbor, and Sears maintained that buffer. And it's a huge buffer. If you've ever been out there, I mean, it's not only wide, it's not only long, but the mature trees, they're 60, 70, 80 feet high, but they're at the end of their useful life. And a number of them, particularly over the last few years, have fallen, have died, and there is a great need to enhance that buffer. This is a perfect opportunity for us as the neighbors who live along there to get that done. And I really want to give Russo's people credit for having spent the time with me and with a few others, walking that site and getting our ideas of what should happen there. And we gave them many ideas, certain things, because where their detention basin is, it's going to be there, that's not there today, that's just a field. But that's the trade-off that you have here. They are making significant improvements in that buffer along Clifton and along Cotter. They're going to be regrading. And I don't think it was stated strongly enough that the number of plantings that they're going to put there are enormous. I mean, there is and they've got a different concept where it's going to not be one straight line of those trees, but there's going to be pockets of where you're going to have really, really nice, different look, but still will maintain the buffer kind of appearance. But they've also taken input from me, particularly with regard to putting shrubbery in that's not going to get eaten in the first week by the deer colony that we have. And I think it's important that they recognize that. Landscape architect came back with a plan, had made those changes. So I'm confident in trusting Russo Development to do the right thing here. Knowing of their reputation outside of the city of New Brunswick helps, but having had the interaction that I've had with them, I have a lot of trust that what they're going to be doing for us as neighbors in Dewey Heights is really going to be a major improvement for all of us. I think that I particularly don't think traffic issue is an issue for us, where the ingress and egress is for this site. Really doesn't impact Dewey Heights at all. But I think that overall, again, I wanted to say I do support the plan. I think it's one that's really going to have a real positive impact for the city of New Brunswick. And I want to emphasize again, to credit them for making that $1 million contribution to affordable housing, that the city can determine where best that money is going to be utilized. And they've creating that fund that other developers will ultimately be contributing into as well. So I applaud them for the project. I think it's great, and I really appreciate the work that they've done with us neighbors who are most concerned about that buffer area.
Okay, next up is, I hope I got the first name right, Amber Saravio.
My name is Amber Saravia, last name S-A-R-A, V as in Victor, I-A. Just to go off the last, sorry, yeah.
You swear affirm to tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
Yep. Just to go off the last point, $1 million payment for affordable housing, if split up between 30 years, is only about $33,000, which is not much. So definitely got to keep that in consideration. Realize that it really isn't much money for such a large city and such a growing city. I would like to point out some census data points. There's about 36% of people here in New Brunswick who are in poverty. It definitely is a huge issue within the city. We got to keep that in mind when we are thinking about development. Although the plan, seems nice, there are a lot of amenities for the people who would be living within these different apartments and townhomes. Even myself, I'm like, oh wait, maybe I want to live here. But the price, it's just too much. It's $1,700 about for a studio, and it's outrageous. The median household income from 2016 to 2020, it's about $43,000, and so that means that a household at this income can afford to spend up to about $1,000 a month. So we really need to make sure that we're keeping that in mind when we're thinking about how much we are charging for rent with these new developments within the city. Another point I would like to make is that the median age of someone in New Brunswick is 23 and a half years old. I'm actually that age, which is pretty funny. Went to Rutgers, and I would like to stay here. I like the community, I like the people here. But it's getting harder and harder with the rising rent prices. I've been talking to my friends, community about the rent prices, and it's challenging. We want to stay here, we want to be part of the community, but the opportunities are becoming less and less. And with projects like these, we're just pursuing gentrification further, and we want to make sure that we're taking care of the community and we are representing the city of New Brunswick, because it is a truly beautiful place, and I'll leave it at that. I hope you guys take my thoughts into consideration. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, next up, Patricia Bombolin, for real this time.
My neighbor, Mr. Sika, has asked to go in front of me, if you'll allow that.
Yeah,
No objection, go ahead.
yeah.
Hi, everybody. Can't understand anybody. You guys don't know how to project your voices.
Okay, we need your name first.
My name is Jimmy Sika, S-I-C-A.
Do you swear or affirm to tell the whole truth?
I swear to tell everything. Trust me. And that camera should be off. I belong to the Screen Actors Guild. If that camera is on, I get paid. And that's fact. I am the longest living resident in Dewey Heights. I've been there for 63 years. Dewey Heights. My backyard was a cornfield. I live on the corner of Cotter Drive and Clifton Avenue. My backyard was a cornfield. I used to go out in the morning and steal the corn so I could eat it at night. It was Clifton Avenue was cornfield. Both sides of the road, cornfield. Now it became Sears. Now, when Sears came in there, how many years ago, there was some deal that was made that Sears could be the only place that is there. The only place that could be on that property is Sears. Now that's all changed. That's all changed. Now, like the gentleman said before, he said the berm. That berm is in such terrible shape, and like I said, I'm the longest resident in Dewey Heights, so I know, and I own several properties in Dewey Heights, and it's absolutely horrendous. Horrendous, the berm. There's mosquitoes all over, there's everything. So if that's an indication of what this organization is going to do, it's no way, Jose. No way. That can't happen. That can't happen. It's terrible. And is there going to be any? There's one entrance and one exit out of Dewey Heights. Is that going to change?
there
Don't be afraid of me.
No, I'm not. I would say, so there are no changes proposed off-site. So everything's staying the same except for on the property that's shown.
All right, now Clifton Avenue, I live right in the cul-de-sac. I have 2 houses there. Clifton Avenue used to go all the way through. They put a fence up, I'm in the cul-de-sac. Doesn't go through now, but is that gonna go through once this circus happens?
No.
It's not gonna, because it'll
fence is staying.
it will destroy Dewey Heights.
So the gate that's there now is remaining.
Okay. When are they gonna start maintaining that berm? If, like I said, if this is an indication of what this circus is gonna do with their doings, the berm is not a good example of what's gonna happen later on. Because it is a total stinking mess. And they have trees that they're gonna cut down, a million zillion trees that, to me, it's not necessary to kill these trees. Plus, I don't want, there's deer out there. I don't want my deer messed with. I love animals. So I don't want my deer to be messed with. So if I find anybody messing with them, trust me, I'm cuckoo. And I admit it. I admit that I'm crazy. So what could I say?
The berm you're referring to, what property?
Sorry, sir, I can't hear you, sir.
This berm that you're talking about, on whose property does it exist?
On whose property? It's Sears' property.
Okay.
Yeah, that berm it runs all along, as the gentleman said, I think Mr. Kelso said. Mr. Kelso said it runs all along Clifton Avenue, from Route 18 all the way up to the cul-de-sac by my house, which is on the corner of Cotter Drive and Clifton Avenue.
What I've heard is that there'll be improvements to this associated with this.
Yeah, but they're not indicating that now. They cut the lawn today. A poor kid was out there with a push mower, and that'll take him a month of Sundays to cut that grass there.
The applicant doesn't currently own the property.
It's some company from Long Island that they get. They're probably paying them 10 cents an hour because that's the amount of work they're doing. It's terrible. It's absolutely terrible.
All I can say to that point is that the applicant that's before you this evening is not the current property owner. If the applicant were to be approved, then the applicant would close on the property and take ownership. And at that point, not only would maintenance of the property be our responsibility, but we would be able to implement the proposal that's before you to enhance the buffer as we've described with all of the additional plantings and also taking out the dead and dying trees and putting in hardier ones that are native species.
But there are
et cetera.
some trees that they have marked to cut down that aren't dead. They're not dead, they're healthy trees. So I don't know where they're getting this from. They're gonna cut down like 100 trees there, some ridiculous amount.
Mr. Tronco, can you speak to the trees that are being flagged for removal and why?
Most of the trees are declining or, partially dead. There's, I think, about 60 limbs that are being removed. Most of the trees are multi-stem type trees. So
I'm declining and partially dead, but
So-
are you
so
gonna cut me down?
I mean, I think the representation was that
I'm trying to make a record here.
the representation was they're past their useful life, and they are, because they're trees that are about to die, are falling over. So we have tagged selectively through the buffer to take out the ones that are dead or in decline and leave a majority of the trees in place.
Okay, and there's only gonna be one entrance in and out of Dewey Heights, is that correct?
The access to Dewey Heights is not changing. That nothing off-site is changing.
Okay, and the berm is gonna protect us from the circus, right?
The berm, the 100-foot berm that's there today is being enhanced, and that should provide screening.
See, I couldn't hear anything because you people don't know how to project your voices, man. You gotta project, projection. And I couldn't hear a word that anybody was saying. Because it's like,
It
yeah.
sounds to me like some of these improvements that are planned for this berm that you're talking about might actually help, from your standpoint.
I hope so, because it is really in bad shape. Bad shape. And
Thank you.
you're going to get a bill from the Screen Actors Guild. And after, I belong to the American Federation of Radio and Television Artists, too, and Actors Equity. So I'm on camera now, and that's, it's very expensive. I don't come cheap. All right, guys. Adios, amigos. Peace, love, happiness.
Yes, indeed.
And just remember, I'm the longest continuing resident of Dewey Heights. I'm like considered the village idiot or carnival trash in Dewey Heights. And I'm proud of it. And I do it well. I'm an idiot and I do it well. So it's always good to do something good. You know, if you do it well, you're successful.
Thank you.
Peace. Thank you.
Our final speaker is Patricia Bombolin.
I'm going to take my mask off because I'm kind of suffocating, but it is one of the privileges of living in Dewey Heights to have Mr. Sika as my neighbor for the last 25 years. I promise you, you've never been to parties like we have on Cotter Drive. My name is Patricia Bombolin. I'm a resident of Dewey Heights. I live at 18 Cotter Drive, which is down at the end of the other part of the berm. Good evening, Mr. Solomons. It is, I do swear, sir, to tell the truth. I always do. And it is a pleasure to see you. I haven't seen you in a number of years. Yes.
If you could spell your last name for the
Yes. B as in boy, O, M as in Mary, B as in boy, E, L, Y, N as in Nancy.
And I'll just do the formal swearing in.
I do swear to
Affirm to tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth.
Yes, sir, I do. Thank you. I think all the comments about the berm are relevant. They were comments I wanted to emphasize. I'm not going to repeat them. I echo them. My chief concern is I have seen some of the trees marked. I see the trees every day, several times a day. I am concerned that we're going to lose the thickness and the height. Like, we've got a lot of screening, and we want to maintain and build up the density. What has happened is, it's true, Sears was a great neighbor. Sears went into decline. You've read about it in the press. And as it went into decline, it took care of the berm less. And after Hurricane Sandy, it really went down. The upper part, the Clifton Avenue part, has been better maintained than the Cotter Drive part. They pay us no mind on the Cotter Drive part. They pay more mind to Clifton Avenue. We want equal time to Clifton Avenue. I will say to you, our neighbors on Cotter Drive are concerned about affordable housing. They don't like the fact that this beautiful development that we all know has to happen. We know it has to happen. We want it to happen. What was going on in that parking lot, you don't want to know. It was disgusting, all right? The place went down. Sears went to pot, right? So, my neighbors overwhelmingly agree that housing developments in the city of New Brunswick should be integrated socioeconomically. That it's healthy for our society, it's healthy for our community, it's healthy for our children and their future more than anything else. And I say to you something that I preach. New Jersey is one of only 3 states in the whole United States that has an anti-segregation clause in its state constitution. And any public official who has dared to try to enforce it has been summarily dismissed. And that goes back to the 1960s. And so when we come to you and we say there's no affordable housing component, we are advocates for a better future for our families and our children, and to have unsegregated schools and unsegregated communities. So I know it's not your jurisdiction and your domain, but this is an audience that needs to hear this message, because I don't know what board you're going to be on next. The mayor will put you somewhere else. But think about it and do your homework. Now, I do have questions. I didn't hear how many people are expected to live in this development once it is complete.
I don't know that I have that figure. Looking for, Mr. Secker, did you have an assumption about that?
I don't have individual people, I can tell you the total, bless you, the total number of units, is that helpful, the number of units?
I don't know what I did. Michael.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's, one of the buildings is 268 residential units, the other mixed-use building is 262, and there's 190 townhomes. So the total, I believe, is 720 when you add that up. That's the number of units, obviously there's some studios, one bedrooms, two bedrooms.
Some figure 2 to 4 times of that, in that range. I bring up Mr. Eldridge, one of my other honorable neighbors, who lives across the street from Mr. Sika. He has been suffering, and the people along that corner have been suffering with this sewer that overflows, particularly with a particular awful stench, especially in the summers. And it is just unacceptable that this project is being put forth without upgrade to the sewer. There must be upgrade to the sewer. You are going, I mean, you had Sears there, it was a big place, but you didn't have, you know, that many human beings living on that space 24/7 using the sewer. All right? And I'm telling you, it's going to be worse. Additional, no renewable energy in this project. Highly objectionable. Additional, all those people coming, using electricity, no renewable energy, no upgrade to the grid. The grid is used by our neighborhood, the apartments behind us, part of Rutgers, although they may have some of their own stuff, Rutgers, that's another problem. I also want to urge you on the request for a waiver on the trees. Give them the waiver for the spacing of the trees, but please don't give them the waiver for the number of the trees that the ordinance requires. This whole neighborhood, Dewey Heights, has lost so many trees in the last decade, especially with the widening of Route 18. And the wildlife that we had in that neighborhood, which included everything from turkeys and chipmunks and rabbits and everything else, the birds, everything was decimated. The pandemic brought some of it back miraculously. But please hold them to the number of trees, but let them put them where they can to make their project beautiful and efficient. I agree with that. We need trees. We also need trees for the pollution. They're near Route 18. I have a lot more that I'd like to share with you, but I think the 30-year abatement is abysmal. I'd like to know who's going to do their sanitation. Are they paying for it themselves? Is the city paying for it? And I'd really like them to keep maintenance of the berm. I would like them to do the berm, because you know what? What the guy said earlier about this not being a box, about this having some aesthetic attractiveness, we got too many boxes that have been put up in New Brunswick. I love the fact that this is not another box. So if you can answer those questions.
I'll try to cover them. So I'm going to work backwards, I think. So yes, the applicant does intend to maintain the berm. And if I didn't say it, I meant to say it at the outset, which is that the applicant would be willing to agree to a condition of approval requiring it to enter into a berm maintenance agreement with the city. We're happy to do that, and we intend to take on that responsibility. With regard to your question about sanitation, did you mean like trash pickup? Or
Yes.
Okay.
Who's doing it?
A private hauler, paid for by the applicant.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's a good thing. The one other thing is about the gate that Mr. Sika referenced. You need to know something. When Route 18 was recently being resurfaced late at night, right, which isn't a city thing, I think it's a state resurfacing. If if you tried to get into or leave the Dewey Heights, you couldn't enter Dewey Heights. If you were an ambulance person from somewhere that doesn't know about Dewey Heights, you would have gone in circles and circles and you would have never got inside. If you're a new fireman and you don't know how to get into Dewey Heights, you would have never got inside late at night when they were doing the resurfacing. One of our concerns in the neighborhood is that the gate be there. The gate is there. God forbid there's some kind of crazy emergency. We know there's flooding on Route 18.
Yeah, the
I know.
gate is not changing.
I just want to emphasize the importance of the gate, the importance of our EMTs, our firemen, our police being able to get a key for that gate, because it can become a critical situation, you know, not expected. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is that the last of the comments?
That's correct. That's correct.
Do board members have any suggestions or conditions in response to some of the comments we received? I mean, I think we've heard some things which from the applicant that indicate that it might be an improvement, addressing their concerns. I'd like to address the gentleman's concerns about his sewage issues. However, it's off-site. It sounds to me like that's something that the city really ought to be addressing. That's not necessarily related to this development. I don't feel that a condition. I personally, I'm trying to look for a way to address that, but I don't see how to make that a condition associated with this development.
But do we have
board members? Has anyone else any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, do we have? Can you speak specifically to? It's a fair enough point that there was previously a retail location there that didn't have what's called a safe estimate of 2,500 people, right? And what that ultimately would do to the sewage line. I think it's also fair to state that what's going on with your section of it is a city thing, which should absolutely be addressed. But the stress that this would put on that could ultimately result in intensifying an issue that has not yet been resolved.
So I'm going to ask Mr. Savage to talk generally about the process that the applicant is in the middle of to make sure that the sewage system is right-sized for the proposed development. I think that's probably the best way to address it. That's outside my expertise. Oh, Mr. Dominguez is raising his hand.
I'd like to jump in on the subject.
Good evening. My name is Dan Burke. I'm the board engineer and I'm also the city engineer. And under my authority in the office I stand with as a municipal engineer, we address and deal with the uses of the sanitary sewer system. I heard enough tonight and I heard something just previous to this, and I'll work with the applicant's engineer and we'll get into this matter very quickly. I'm going to see if I can get our sewer crews out there to consider jetting that line. Because I heard something from the developer's contractor about the disconnects and so forth. Also, as a condition of this approval, one of my conditions is that we have to model the connection points. There's 2 sewer connection points proposed, one at Phelps and one in Dewey Heights and Clifton Avenue. And we will model the anticipated flows going in each direction to ensure that the existing system, the city's existing system, can accept and transport those flows adequately. We have developed a computerized model. We have all the segmented, all the slopes, all the diameters, all the material types throughout the city. And as a condition of this approval, the applicant has agreed to fund the modeling of the sewer flows anticipated from this development through our system to ensure we can accept it adequately. And it's also, there will also be what they call a TWA permit requirement because of exceedance of a certain gallons per day flow. Isn't that correct, Mr. Savage?
That's correct.
All right.
That TWA is through the DEP, New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection. That permit.
So that's got to be signed off by the city. It's got to be signed off by the receiving agency, which is MCUA, and it's got to be signed off by DEP before this can go forward.
Correct.
And just, sir, the TWA is a treatment works approval. which is, again, it's meant to ensure that the sewer servicing the property is appropriate.
And just to bring this up, Mr. Burke, that's in your memo to the applicant, correct? So we don't have to have that broken out as a separate condition.
Mr. Chairman, I believe there was a condition of that the applicant enter into a maintenance agreement for the buffer zone berm that's been discussed.
Yes, I heard
Yeah.
that.
Is that one of the conditions that's currently on?
Anything else, any other recommendations or conditions from board members associated with this development? I just want to confirm with Dan that this site plan, which is what we're here to consider, is consistent with the city zoning and also is consistent with the board's approved redevelopment for this area, correct?
It's consistent with the redevelopment plan, which in this case is an overlay, which supplants the underlying zoning. The underlying zoning for this site was for the Sears use. So in this case, the redevelopment plan is an overlay on the site, which, just,
Okay, thank you. Katie, do you want to address any other conditions associated with it?
So should the board act favorably on this application?
Excuse me, could you go slower?
Oh, sure.
Thank
Should
you.
I can also email this to you tomorrow.
Okay, but I'd like to
Sure.
have a nice clean.
Sure. Should the board act favorably on the application, we recommend the following conditions of approval. Compliance with the terms of the city engineer report dated July 11th, 2022. Payment of a site performance bond in an amount reviewed and approved by the city engineer. Submission of a site inspection escrow deposit for engineering inspection fees in an amount calculated pursuant to Title 16-24-160. Payment of all water and sewer connection fees pursuant to Titles 1304 and 1308. Issuance of a road opening permit from the city engineer if required. The applicant shall schedule a pre-construction meeting with the city engineering department. Compliance with the terms of the Vignell Consulting Group report dated July 8th, 2022. Payment of a redeveloper fee if applicable to the city of New Brunswick. Planning review escrow funded for all anticipated post-approval reviews. Payment of any other fees due to the city of New Brunswick related to the development or use of the project. Payment of all outstanding taxes and water sewer fees. Middlesex County Planning Board approval or waiver. Freehold Soil Conservation District approval or waiver. Any other outside agency approval or waiver as required. Filing of a subdivision in accordance with the MAP Filing Act. Submission of engineering and/or architectural plans to comply with any changes required by the planning or engineering memos or plan amendments offered at the hearing, if any. Execution of a Title 39 parking enforcement agreement. Compliance with the city's water service system ordinance. Trash recycling pickup to be provided by a private hauler at no expense to the city. The applicant will enter into a maintenance agreement with the city to maintain the buffer. The applicant shall individually meter the townhouse units per the city water utility. All utilities and other site improvements to be maintained by the applicant at their sole expense. All on-site utilities to be constructed underground. All temporary encroachments in the public right-of-way shall require city council approval. All construction staging shall be done on site unless an encroachment allowing into the public right-of-way is approved by city council. Streets shall be kept clean of sediment and debris. The applicant shall cause the streets to be cleaned if directed to do so by the Director of Public Works. Tracking pads shall be installed at all construction exits. Replacement of damaged streets, curbs, and sidewalks per the direction of the city engineer. And the applicant is seeking preliminary and final site plan approval. And I have marked design waivers for parking lot setback to the right-of-way, parking lot screening and landscaping, parking area buffer width, streets, trees, spacing, and foundation plantings. And that's all I have.
I'm sorry, did you also say the subdivision? I might have missed it. I know you said preliminary and final site plan.
And, yes, and subdivision, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Yes.
Just wanted to make sure. Thanks.
Did you, I guess there's also a condition of, the map filing law.
Oh, yeah, I did filing of subdivision in accordance with the Mount Filing Act.
Motion to approve based on the aforementioned conditions.
Oh, I had more questions, at least one more question. motion.
Can we address these questions, or do we need to act on that motion?
Procedurally,
You
Mr.
can withdraw the
Solomon.
motion. for
I'll
purposes
withdraw
of
for
answering the
now.
question. Thank you. You spoke specifically to the sewer and that it won't place added stress on the grid, and that's awesome. To that respect, can you speak specifically to the electrical concerns also raised?
I cannot, but let me see if our engineer can. Yeah.
I mean, at this stage, we haven't started the in-depth conversation with the utility company, so that's part of their approval. If if upgrades to their system are required for this development, then that'll have to be addressed as part of that approval. We're gonna have to have their approval for any connections we make.
So, in other words, if the electric company requires that upgrades be made in order to serve the
Then-
project, the applicant will make them.
You would have to make the improvements that would be required for the connections.
Anything else before we proceed with the motion?
I reinstate my motion to approve based on the aforementioned conditions.
Second?
I'll second.
Melissa Checo,
Yes.
Matthew Ferguson,
Yes.
Susan Story Ludwig,
Yes.
Adam Adorno,
Yes.
Zach Wright,
Abstain.
Anthony Camioni,
Yes.
Kevin Hoagland,
Yes.
Bob Cardigan.
Yes.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We really appreciate all of your time and attention. Thank you.
This meeting is not over yet. Moving on to any other matters of interest to the public. Mr. Glasgow, is
Yes, good evening, members of the board. Charles Cradaville.
there anyone else?
Can we get the noise down a little bit?
I'm sorry, just before the board is on, would you like us to leave the
Patty, you
exhibits,
too.
correct?
Yes, please.
Okay, thank you. Sorry to interrupt.
Does anyone else other than Mr. Cradaville want to provide a statement, any other matters of interest to the public? They look like it.
Mind if we let it get a little quieter?
Good evening. Members of the board, I don't mean to prolong the meeting. I did want to follow up at prior meetings. I had asked about hybrid meetings where folks could contribute to the meetings through a conferencing platform. I know the chair had promised to look into it. This was a couple months ago, and I know it was the chair and you're the vice chair, but did anybody look into it? Is that something that this board would be open to doing to improve public input and make meetings more accessible?
I have no information on that at this time. I can't report any progress in that regard. Can you?
I have nothing to add.
Okay.
Sorry.
Can I expect an answer at a future meeting if I come back and ask a fourth time?
I don't have an answer for that right now.
Well, I have a feeling I'll be back, so I'll hope somebody will have an answer, but wish you all a good evening and thank you.
Thank you. Motion to adjourn?
Motion.
Second.
All in favor?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.